Live on DAZN Worldwide, April 26th, Eubank Jr versus Ben. Buy now at DAZN.com/boxing.
That's what's on my mind.
Hello and welcome back to episode 76 of the award-winning combat sports podcast, The Boxing Show, with me, your host, Rob Tebbutt. I'd like to remind everybody, because it's been a while, to please like, comment and subscribe. Turn your notifications on for more boxing content. Now that's out of the way, we are back. I am delighted to be joined today by former WBO super-featherweight champion of the world and former host of the Ring Magazine podcast, Mr. Andy Clarke, as we look forward to Chris Eubank Jr versus Conor Benn this weekend. Guys, we're back. Nice to see you both.
Yeah,
you too.
Yeah, I didn't get paid for the 75 yet, so do I say stuff? I thought I'd mention it. Maybe you could do it on your computer now.
Don't know what you're talking about, Barry, but it's not taken as long to fall back into old habits. We do have a lot to get on with today, and traditionally we are running slightly late. But yes, the first boxing show for a little while now. I think it was our preview of the year was our last one. We do have lots to get through, so we won't dwell on things and delay things for too long. But good to have you both here. I know everybody's been asking, and I'm sure Barry in particular has missed me as much as I've missed him and missed doing the show with you guys. So yeah, we're back. I'm very happy.
To be honest, I generally haven't thought about it. I wasn't really enjoying it at the time. So when it sort of stopped, I thought,
can you insult me into the microphone?
There
you go.
I thought pretty much.
People can't hear. You need to hear all the glowing things that you're about to say.
It wasn't the end of the world, to be honest. Just move on, don't you?
Yeah, to be fair.
I still got 45 other podcasts I got to go through.
This is usually the bit where you plug them.
I'm not doing that anymore.
Oh, really?
Actually, I made my debut on the 5 Live
I don't
podcast.
plug anyone anymore.
No, we're not plugging that. This has just been left right. You did that. You made your.
I made my debut on the 5 Live podcast after Whittaker Cameron on Saturday night. Bunsey, for lack of other options, I'm guessing, grabbed me on the way out. It's it is good to be back. Me and Rob, though, we did spend 7 hours in a hotel room together.
We were working. We were working.
Thursday or Friday. Was it Friday?
Listen, you had to take all your kit just to have an affair to make sure you weren't having an affair.
Overlooking the Resorts World Lake. It was real, wasn't it? It was real.
So you commentated over my commentary. Is that what it was?
No, we were doing Sergey Kovalev.
We were doing Kovalev.
We were rivals. We were going head to head.
It was his final fight on Friday. It was streamed live in the UK and the US on Boxing News.
Yeah.
Sergey Kovalev brought the curtain down on his storied career.
Good win, actually.
Yeah, it was good. A 7th round stop. It was a decent fight.
It was.
I think that kind of says a little bit more about where Kovalev is at this stage of his career. But it was a pretty good fight. Mann kind of came. I'm not sure where the punch resistance is anymore on Artur Mann. Straight back in talking about Sergey Kovalev. But yeah, it was a decent show, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was, and it worked out what they wanted to happen, which was him winning. Happened, and that didn't look guaranteed at the start because he's not a cruiserweight really, and Mann always has been, and he looked like he might be a bit too much for him. But I think the matchmakers probably knew that maybe his whiskers had seen better days, and that's how he won, wasn't it? Basically, so I think everybody went home happy. It was packed out in Chelyabinsk, and the only thing is, it could well be the case that after that he thinks, you know what, I think I can have another one.
What happens, isn't it?
Well, he was talking in the week, wasn't he, that he was only going to retire because of a lack of opportunities, and yeah, now he's won by stoppage. I mean, one fight that I was kind of thinking could potentially happen or would sort of make some sense. Kovalev against Badou Jack, both like older names, bigger names, naturally smaller guys. Badou Jack, despite not fighting in a while, I think he's been reinstated as the WBC
he has, and
cruiser.
you get the feeling that there don't seem to be that many people he does want to fight because he wants a big profile fight, doesn't he? And I think actually that's a good shout. Kovalev would tick every box for him because he's a massive name, but he would be confident that he beat him.
Absolutely. Right, we don't have an awful lot of time, but let's just before we move on, Barry, I know you've been over in Riyadh for the WBC Grand Prix.
Yeah.
How was that? I didn't catch much of it, but it looked like a quite interesting concept.
It was alright. It worked actually. You know, there was 16 fights a day, so a lot of fights. So 32 got fighters in each weight, 4 weight categories: featherweights, super lightweights, middleweights, and heavyweights, of course. So it was a lot of work for me and my colleagues, but it was good. And the featherweights were fantastic, full of quality. So it's a 6-round format for the first 2 rounds, and it goes to 8 rounds for the semi-final, 10 rounds for the final, I believe. And then the winner gets a shot at the WBC silver belt. But more importantly than that, there's loads of fighters on that bill who took the fight on that show, who took the fight at late notice pretty much. And they're fighters who might be undefeated. Most of them were undefeated. And we know in this sport, being undefeated means a lot, but also doesn't mean you're going to get a contract or on a big bill or any fights at all sometimes. So some of those guys hadn't boxed for 18 months, 2 years. One guy, I think, a lot of them for a while, they hadn't boxed because they couldn't get the opportunity. So this tournament sort of gives you a platform and a springboard to announce yourself. Even the guys who got beat, I would say, certainly those featherweights on the first day, you can make a tournament with them because it was really exciting to watch. As they went through with the heavyweights, not as exciting, but we got more stoppages, and it was good. And they implemented some new change in the rules. There was the replays, instant replays. They called it something else, so I apologise. I don't remember what it's called. But anyway, that worked because they did.
Also a horn.
Oh yeah, the 30-second horn, which actually worked. But first of all, like they didn't tell them first of all that they sort of mentioned it, and then when the horn went on, a couple of fighters stopped. Nobody got hurt or caught with that, luckily. But the horn was like a. So I was just waiting for like a clown to do a somersault or something. One of those. And so that was quite amusing. But especially when you had some of the referees who speak in English, but it's not their natural language, like myself. And there were a couple of French guys, and they're going. And when you hear the horn, no punch. And it was funny the way they were doing it. But it worked. That worked. And also that 30 seconds, and it gives them more impetus to go forward. They had the enhanced scoring system where you got, so the idea is if the fight's a draw, but I've just stolen 3 rounds, but you win your 3 rounds big, it still becomes a draw, doesn't it, in boxing? Irrelevant, even though you won your round bigger than me. So this is an opportunity now. There was 4 categories, and you had to put a score each round per category to the guy who won that round. So if you won it big, you put like 4 and down the scale. And then if it goes to draw, they compact the scores for that, and then they
it's a good idea, that.
It sort of worked.
I mean, again, it is still subjective.
I kept thinking yeah. Well, I mean, there was loads of things.
How else are you going to do it?
There was a couple of knockdowns there was one knockdown that was ruled a knockdown when they said it wasn't, and there was 2 that were not ruled a knockdown when they originally were called knockdowns. So that helped. I think that system there with the replays, doing it in between the rounds, because we get to see it as well, so we can describe it to the. We can describe it to obviously the public watching at home, and then we get the official decision before the round starts, so we can tell the audience back home that it was or wasn't a knockdown, and so everyone around gets to know it also. So that's quite interesting. And and open scoring after 3 rounds, 2 rounds, 4 rounds, and then obviously 2 more rounds, and a 6-round fight, and that worked. 'Cause we always think with open scoring we're going to go the other way. Now once you know you're a mile ahead, you're going to run. But that didn't quite work. Maybe because they're younger and less experienced, or whether they haven't got the ability. But it made the fighters who were losing have a little bit an extra go, and the ones who were winning try and seal it. So, I mean, you're gonna have this in boxing. You're gonna have loads of issues with it. But I mean, a lot of the things they had to go at.
I've always thought those 2 things had plenty of merit. The open scoring, I've never had a problem with that. The British Boxing Board of Control don't like it. And again, the board don't really want. Currently, they don't want instant replay, but if you use it in the right way and it doesn't really interrupt the fight, then it's great, because is it a knockdown or isn't it a knockdown? You just continue with the fight and then do it in between rounds.
And the clash of heads thing.
Is it a punch or a clash of heads that causes a cut? You just continue with the fight and do it in between rounds, so you know. And then if you have a major incident and the fight is over, like someone gets hit on the bell, after the bell, what was it, and they're knocked out, then the fight's over anyway, and then you can make a decision. I mean, on black and white, yes or no things, where it's not It's not an interpretation. It's was it or wasn't it?
Yeah, we've been having a lot of these discussions, obviously not on here, for the last couple of months about refereeing decisions. I mean, even you look at the Sky card at the weekend, the Sam Eggington end of the fight, was that caused by a punch? Was it caused by a clash of heads? There was the Goldsmith fight as well.
Yeah, that was a really interesting one.
Yeah, the end of the 6th round. I mean, that was quite strange. I mean, people who didn't see it was the pre-televised. It was the Midlands area middleweight title fight. Great fight, very interesting fight. But yeah, Goldsmith got nailed by right uppercut on the bell. Wasn't after the bell. Dominic Ingle ran in the ring, picked him up, and dragged him over, which I'm not sure he's allowed to do.
No, you're not really supposed to do that.
Yeah, even if it is a foul.
But that was an interesting one, because I was watching that, and basically I was pretty convinced at the time that it landed on the bell, and therefore you count. The referee didn't count, but then if you're not going to count, then that's because it was after the bell, and in which case you need to give the fighter up to 5 minutes to recover, because it's an accidental foul, and he didn't do that either. So he didn't. It's got to be one of those two things, and he should have counted. But in the end, it didn't really make any difference, because Troy Coleman went on to win the fight. He scored a legit knockdown and didn't get it, but he went on to win the fight.
Yeah,
so.
Start of the 7th round, the writing was very much on the wall. Right, we do have an awful lot to get through. I keep saying that because it is very much true. But before we talk about...
If you stop saying that, we get through it.
There we go. Before we talk about Sunday, let's talk about Saturday. Andy, going to come to you on Dalton Smith. Decision win over Mathieu Germain. Obviously still retains his position as the WBC mandatory challenger at super lightweight. Not the most spectacular of performances, but a win nonetheless for Dalton Smith.
Yeah, I think that's basically what it was, wasn't it? And you're not going to be absolutely amazing every time. I know that people talk about him and they talk about Azim, and every time each one of them fights, we try and draw some kind of conclusion from it, but it's not always possible. And it was a solid performance and a perfectly good win. But they do need now for him, he needs something to really get his teeth into now, because what you don't want is him to get frustrated and stagnate a bit, because I think there's a danger of that. But they're well aware of it, and they want to get him that fight with Puello, don't they? That's what they want.
I mean, he's at that position now where his next fight should or could be a world title, or could and should. And yeah, it's that. I mean, we talk about coasting in fights, one of the most dangerous things you can do, because you give a guy an opportunity to come back into a fight. Lyndon Arthur, where are you? Lyndon Arthur, you're the worst for it.
You're going to see him this week.
Yeah, well, he's a really good fighter. He has a few rounds, he gets dominant, and he has to coast and loads fighters back into it. And I just think, doing that in a fight, but you can do that with your career, where you're on the verge of for a title fight, so you're coasting around, boxing people who you're better than, and then waiting for that opportunity, because you don't want to take the risk of being in a big fight and then losing, and then that opportunity's gone forever. But also, you end up coasting, you end up getting beat by somebody who's not good enough to beat you, or underperforming, which you probably say Saturday was. I know the guy ran, but I mean, the quality that Dalton Smith is, you should be able to go through the gears quicker, or maintain it a little bit, and that's what you're there. That's you got to be shouting. I mean, especially in their weight class, because you got a lot of big earners and the big names. Your world title, even if you were to win it, and I would fancy him to win it, won't be enough to entice them, because they're all about the dollars. Them lot. Because they've already won multiple world titles, or won, most of them have, except for one, and so it's all about the money for him. And so he's going to have to show more than just winning a world title, which is crazy, but that's how it is in his weight division. He's
at that interesting point now. I mentioned that kind of the last couple of fights. Walid Weezer at the start of the year obviously was a first round stoppage. This past weekend wasn't his best performance. Had that brilliant win over Jose Zepeda, but he's now in that position, as you mentioned there, kind of on the verge of boxing for a world title. We've subsequently seen Albert Puello is going to be boxing Subriel Matias, which is a fantastic fight, on the July 12th card, which is a brilliant card. So he's more than likely going to still have to have that in between fight, unless he wants to sit out until potentially the end of the year. What sort of name do you think? Because I think it's fair to say, the golf in quality between your Jose Zepedas and your Walid Weezers, etc., is significant, and indeed, obviously, between Mathieu Germain and a Puello or a Matias. So he's going to want somebody in there, but you don't want, as you mentioned there, the risk of losing your shot. Well,
you've got to think he's going to have some. Well, I think there's going to have to be a risk. And he's going to want to box because you want to be sharp as well. It's not just the training; you want to be sharp. So you want to, and also, they want to get someone who stylistically suits him. So I think someone who comes at him. Comes right at him. That's when he looks his best. So it's a hard one. I'm not quite sure off the top of my head who I would pick, but I think he needs to have. I think it needs to be a decent fight and a tough fight. I mean, there's a risk of getting hurt and caught and knocked and beat, of course. But I mean, you can't wait that long because you're talking if he's boxing in July, the winner of that fight then, with negotiations, depending who wins, by the way. Then where do they, they might want that fight in Puerto Rico if the other guy wins, for instance, and be demanding on that, and just to get more money, and then the negotiation takes a lot longer, and plus the fighter might not want to box for another 5-6 months. So you're looking like the end. You're looking September if you're lucky. To be honest, that's the truth of it. In this era, maybe that's probably too soon, isn't it? So no, he's going to have a fight and a hard fight in between. I think. I mean, that's what would happen in yesteryear. And I mean, before my time. I mean, when I was boxing. I mean, before that, you'd have to keep it. Gives you a sharpness. Some
potential names. Just going to throw some names out there. Regis Prograis, somebody in and around that top level. Jack Catterall, obviously 2 southpaws. Neither Puello and Matthias are southpaws, so you may want an orthodox fight to prepare for. But it's a bit different when you're preparing for orthodox, isn't it? I
wouldn't pick Catterall because I think that's a fight where whoever wins, that's a real standoff sort of fight. I think that is.
Yeah.
I mean, the Prograis fights are good. I mean, I was talking about earlier. You want to entice those big names. If you do win a world title, to entice those bigger names towards you, beating someone like Prograis, who's a well-known figure, as is Catterall, but certainly in America, Prograis probably has a bigger name. Then that helps there if you do a job on him.
He's still at that stage as well now, where Prograis has been beaten a few times, but not been stopped yet. Yeah. So it's still.
And he's still a very good fighter. He could beat Dalton Smith, by the way. But you'd fancy Dalton. I think Dalton's the real deal. I mean, whether he beats some of the elite ones at that weight, I'm not quite sure. But I mean, he's good.
I agree though that if in the interim, you do need something that's going to get his juices flowing, because otherwise you may as well not bother and just give him like a lengthy break and say, listen, just go away, reset, have that kind of like mini retirement, as Gary Neville likes to call it, and just kind of make sure all aches and pains are completely gone, because I think that would be better than just having someone who you can't really get up for, because they can always go wrong as well, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he goes. So everybody was very, very excited, rightfully so, after the Jose Zepeda win. But yeah, just in kind of that in-between ground at the minute, Dalton Smith, while he waits for a world title shot. We're just going to fly through the undercard because we've got to talk about Sunday. Kevin Agyarko picks up the majority decision win over Ryan Kelly at short notice. Showed a lot there at short notice, Kevin Agyarko. Josh Warrington returned to the ring with a 10-round decision win over seemingly the new journeyman around the featherweight division, super featherweight division, Asif Khan, who was played his part in there. I fully expect to see him again on the right hand side of the card. Josh Padley with a stoppage win, as was Giorgio Vizioli, good talent, 4th round stoppage win over Kane Baker. So that was Saturday night in Sheffield. Going to go to Sunday in Birmingham. Andy, going to come to you first. You were in attendance for Ben Whittaker's rematch win over Liam Cameron. 2nd round stoppage win from Ben Whittaker to put the ghosts of 6 months ago behind him.
It was a really good night. It was one of those kind of wild nights in the end that you hope for, because what we love about boxing, I think, is some good chaos. You get a finish to a fight and there's all sorts going on in that ring. You can barely keep up and you're trying to process it and talk about it and make your mind up about it on the spot, and that's just my favourite thing, because that's the challenge, isn't it? That's the challenge, and there was a lot happening at the end of that fight particularly, and there was a lot happening during the week, because he's had 6 months of people calling him all sorts, Whittaker, and I know you can argue, and I've said it myself, that he chose this path, and he did, but at the same time I do think, the more I ponder it, that he's having a career because of social media and it being at its kind of zenith, nadir at the minute, whichever way you look at it, and the way he's chosen to use it. I don't think anyone has really walked the path that he's walking. People have done the love me, hate me thing plenty of times, but the way the world is now, it's just different. It's just different, and it's going to be difficult, and it has been difficult for him, because I don't think that is really him in terms of his personality. So there was an awful lot of pressure on him, and I thought he boxed really, really well. He just looked different from the opening bell. He was really sharp. He wasn't getting caught with punches, which he was pretty much from the beginning in Saudi Arabia, and it just looked from the beginning like what happened in Riyadh was going to turn out to be one of those things that we talk about in future years as a blessing in disguise. I didn't think at the end of the first round that he was necessarily going to stop him in the second, but I think Andy Lee has definitely been able to do some work already on getting him to punch harder. He's kind of the guy for that, because obviously he could punch, but he was taught to punch hard in the cronk off the back of an amateur career where he wasn't really a puncher. And I thought the stoppage was a good one because the legs went. He had a really good look, Howard Foster. And that's the difference for me between a kind of good stoppage and a debatable stoppage. And Kev Parker did the same thing with Fraser Clarke and Tete, two really experienced refs who were in a good position, who had a really good look, and then made a very decisive intervention. There's no kind of, shall I, shan't I? Then they dive in and you get the feeling that they don't know if they should have, but better too early than too late. They had a good look and then bang, they're in. This is done. And there wasn't too much of a protest from Cameron, and it's a huge win for him, for Whittaker. It's absolutely huge, and plenty of emotion came out at the end. And it would have been better if he hadn't stuck his head through the ropes and given it to Grant Smith in quite the way that he did. But things happen. And boxing in particular, it is very emotional. And that ring is really small. Hop, skip and a jump, and he's got his head through the ropes. No time to think, no time to take it back. So whilst you don't really want to see it, it was understandable. And actually, it made me think that generally speaking, what it does highlight is how well behaved fighters are in that massively emotional moment most of the time, because almost all of the time, because we very rarely see that, do we? And when you think about it, that's kind of impressive, because I was talking to someone about it yesterday. Footballer scores a goal and loses their head. They might feel like they want to roar off to the opposition dugout and give it to them, but it's quite a long way. And by the time you get there, you might have thought better of it, or somebody might have got a hold of you. But in boxing, you're there. And it's surprising it doesn't, more people don't do it, to be honest. I think fighters are remarkably restrained at times.
They're more in their own little, in that moment of elation, not to think about. I mean, the fact that they actually think that he had time to not celebrate and think, I knew. But I think that's the paranoia of a boxer, and also because he's been under so much scrutiny, and you can understand why, to be honest, because the way he went over was heavy. Well, we were sat ringside, weren't we, in Saudi? It was heavy, but everything looked like it was going to. Everything. If he would have mentioned any other part of his body, then you would have gone tough. If it was a shoulder or neck, you would have gone fair enough, because he went down on his shoulder and his neck. But when he said his ankle, he thought of all the ones to pick. So I tend to think he was genuinely hurt, because of all the ones to pick to get out of a fight, you wouldn't pick something that didn't seem to hit the floor. You pick something that obviously you felt first of all, which was the shoulder and the top of the head and the neck and all the parts that went after that. So, and all the criticism around even before that, with his style. And I always thought it takes a strong character to do that, to do the Naz or Eubank Senior and Junior route of not caring what people think, because it's almost impossible not to care what people think.
It's a hard road, that.
And he was sort of portraying and saying, I think I spoke to him once, and I was going to mention another podcast then. Sky podcast. And that, he doesn't care. It doesn't bother him, but it clearly does. So, I mean, picking the route that he picked is very difficult to do anyway, but doing it knowing that it affects you, I can't see how you can keep it up. But I think you should double down on it. Saying that, I'll contradict myself. That's who you are now. I kept saying about, I'm not a fan. I told him, I'm not a fan of all the showboat in, tapping your opponents on the top of their head and smacking their bum and belittling them. I've never been big into that. I always didn't like it when I was younger. I don't like it now I'm older. I like it, dislike it more. But keep doing it, because that's what will set you apart. Your ability, you have ability. He has toughness as well, by the way. You've guys seen him as an amateur, so you can vouch for that. And he has all the potential to go all the way. Potential, who knows? But what's going to make you a star is the stuff you do, the other stuff, the bells and whistles. No one cares, because ultimately, outside of the boxing, no one gives a shit about what you do in the ring. It's all the social media clips and other stuff you can do elsewhere. And I got through because I'm so pretty. But I mean, whatever.
Your career was based purely on looks, wasn't it? Really,
100%,
when you think about
100%, 100%. Like, it's a hairy chest.
It's not really fair.
It's not. It is what it is. Yeah. I didn't boast about it. I just accepted it.
No, you've always been very self-effacing about it.
Anyway, I true story though. I was the whole idea behind that film, The Gremlins. Anyway, the whole thing is though that I think that's what makes him the star. That's what gets him out there to a mega money. And I think but he had a real chip on his shoulder. That's not a bad thing to have for any boxer. It gives you a steel to train harder, to focus, and the fact that he put himself out of the way of everyone to get right for a fight shows him now what he needs to do to be successful. And having people like Andy, you're only as good as your fighter anyway. Any trainer, and Andy's a fantastic trainer, but I'm sure his trainer was as well. And there's loads of fantastic trainers. Whoever he would have picked would have been right for him.
Yeah,
or wrong, depending on personality. Andy is great, and everyone's going to him at the minute. And he is, and he's brilliant, and the loveliest person. We all know that.
He was very low key last week.
Yeah.
We hardly saw him. He was on his shoulder in the background, but we hardly saw him. And we were kind of thinking, we'll bump into him in the hotel and have 5 minutes, but they weren't in the hotel. And I just think everything went right last week. It's and it's one of those ones where they will look back on Riyadh now and feel like that was almost the perfect thing, because it forced him into doing things that he should already have done, like go away from home to train and really lock in and focus and all that stuff. And I think he does have to keep going down that road, because it's been incredibly successful in terms of his profile. But I think he now knows what it involves, because I don't think he could possibly have known. Like I said, it is uncharted territory, just because of the way the world is now. It's completely different to how it was for, say, Naz or Eubank Sr. And it's different to Eubank Jr. because Eubank Jr. disappears in between fights, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So I think he has to try and own it now. But I think it'll be easier, because I think off the back of this one, and he got booed to the ring by quite a few people.
In Birmingham.
Yeah.
Off the back of this one, I think he'll just be able to say, okay, I've been through the fires. I know what this is now. I know who I am. The people close to me know who I am. As for the rest of you, I genuinely don't really care. I think he might have reached that fork in the road, and I hope so, because it'll make it easier for him.
What was the crowd like? Busy?
Yeah, he was pretty much. I think they opened it up for upwards of 8,000 in the final week, and I think we must have got to about 10. It was pretty full. It's a good arena, that, because the ceiling isn't too high; it's quite low, so the sound kind of bounces around nicely.
So if he's selling tickets on the back of people not liking him, he might be me. Sorry, I mean, they're very, very popular.
That's all right.
Yeah, hang on. I don't have anything for dinner. Thanks. The fact that especially in his own area, selling tickets, that many tickets for people want to see you get beat. That's a commercial success.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that you go off that. I mean, he won't like it, and I almost liked. I sort of like contradicting myself. I don't like it, but I think he should stick that path. It looks like you got a bit of disdain for Sky and the Sky employees like you from ages ago. Andy Scott the other day on the interviews, him and Andy had an issue with his questioning, which I thought was fine and one of the questions he should have asked. But that chip on your shoulder, people who are actually giving you the money, I don't mind that either.
No, I don't mind it.
It's the whole like me against the wall now.
So
I don't mind
Mayweather used to go off on
Yeah.
HBO.
I don't mind it. A bit of back and forth. I said this at the time, didn't I? But I've said it since. A bit of back and forth between fighters and media. What's wrong with that? We get to say what we want to say about them. Yeah. And my stance has always been, it would be ludicrous for me to get upset about somebody then saying what they want to say about what I do.
No,
I mean, that's bullshit.
Yeah, it's
so
bullshit.
if you want to have a kind of
bullshit.
relationship where it becomes, there is a bit of a spark and a bit of friction there, then so what?
Barry, in your estimation, obviously as a former fighter, how would you have felt if somebody would have done that to your corner after the fight? You've just been stopped and runs over to your corner.
Well, my dad's in my corner, so I'm not happy about that. I mean, I wouldn't let that go. I mean, I sound like I want to fight.
Because sorry to interrupt. I'll ask you a question, because that's the kind of the big question that comes from that. Is it too much? And I appreciate what Andy said there about things can happen in the moment. He's been under a lot of strain.
I do think it's unacceptable, but it's also understandable.
Yeah.
And the two things are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I didn't massively worry about it. I mean, you showed the clip enough to see he clearly didn't spit. It looked like he was wanting to spit, but he had to speak, didn't he? So, am I right with that? Because it looked like off watching on TV. Originally, it looked like he might have spat, but then you're looking for it flying out, aren't you?
We've all been ringside enough to know you get a few fluids on you from being there, don't you?
Yeah.
That's just from commentating with Barry.
That's weird, man.
But anyway. Barry.
Can I go there?
No.
Anyway,
it hasn't taken long for it to plummet.
You this time, not me. I mean, It is what it is. You know what I mean? And Grant Smith having a little swipe, give him a little slap across the face, and I'm going to shoot that either. So why should he take it? He shouldn't take that off him. I mean, he's a grown man. They're both grown men, at the end of the day. So I'm not a fan of it. I think the boxing board should have to discipline him. I'm not saying they have to fine him. They have to discipline. They have to, because I mean, we should be our sport should be held at a higher standard than it is already. And I don't think you should fine him like he did Chris Eubank Jr. It's ridiculous.
Well, one point to consider there is if Grant Smith gets up into the ring there, then a situation can happen very quickly.
But he never.
Yeah.
But he never.
No, he didn't. Sure.
No, but that's again like that. I thought that was one thing I was thinking yesterday when I looked back on it. I thought that actually that could have gone very, very far south if Grant Smith had handled it differently, and he deserves credit for not doing that.
Dalton Smith, seeing somebody do that to his dad.
They took it, and that played a big part, because that could have been total and utter chaos.
But then you blame him for everything. Then he gets the blame for it all, but he did it. So, but I mean, it's not a massive issue until it becomes an issue, and because nothing happened, I think you just sort of go, listen, mate.
Andy Lee did his part, didn't he, as peacemaker in the immediate, when it threatened it could potentially boil over. Not sure what Ben Shalom was doing, chasing Ben across the ring, but there we go.
but all in all, right, he did. I think the fight in Saudi, he was paid. They had him on the bill to do what he does for the showboating and all that. That's what he was there for. And I think he wanted to show he was tough, and he tried to fight the wrong fight straight away. But then you gas out doing that against a guy who wants you to fight because he's physically strong and technically not too bad. Cameron, not great, but not too bad, but he's physically strong. But this time he used his feet and his balance and his movement without going too crazy of showboating. He boxed. If he would have done the first fight, he would have got the result. I'm not saying he would have stopped him in 2 rounds, but he would have got I thought he would have got a comfortable win, which I thought he was going to get. And I thought he was going to win this fight as well. Not like that. I thought he was going to go the distance, but I thought he was going to have quite an easy night. I did. That's no disrespect to Cameron. I just thought he was going to have an easy night. And he was fantastic, and that's what you need from your potential superstars now. All that social media stuff is brilliant, but if you can't fight, it's going to blow up really quickly. Yeah. And he's shown on Sunday, more importantly, that he can sell tickets, he can build the drama for a big fight, and he can give us the goods when he needs it the most. When his back's against the wall, he brings out his best performance. So you can't argue with that.
With that being said, just on Ben Whittaker, great performance, back on track very much so. Who next for Ben Whittaker, Andy?
Well, we had Shakan Pitters at ringside. He fights Brad Ray for the European, and the winner of that fight would be a good option for him, definitely. Whether he qualifies for that off the back of beating Liam Cameron, I'm not sure, but I'm sure either one of those two, Pitters or Ray, they're confident lads. They will feel they can beat Ben Whittaker. They won't be scared of him, and they'll know that that's a big fight for which they will get handsomely rewarded. So whoever does win that fight, I'd imagine, why wouldn't you want it? Why wouldn't you want to fight Whittaker? Because as I say, they'll believe that they can win it. Louis Edmonton's the British champion. That would be a bit more difficult, I think, but he needs to be in action again as soon as feasibly possible, I think, because this is some really good momentum to build on, but he is well paid, so it's not really like you can just think, like Callum Simpson did, well, there's a space on the bill, I'll just get out and fight again, because every time he fights, boxer have to pay him a lot. So you can't really do that, which is, unless you speak to him and you can come to some kind of arrangement to say, look, it's better for you to fight than not fight, but we can't pay you what we normally would. Those conversations generally don't go well.
I think if they think he's close, which you probably think he is, to boxing with some sort of meaningful title, then I think he's got to be a little bit fluid about,
flexible,
to be a little bit busier now. I said this before on Sky, that they should literally just have him on every, obviously financial, he should be on every show. So when you think about Sky boxing, you think Ben Whittaker straight away, but no, who's Ben boxing tonight, Saturday? Not who the top of the bill is. Almost make him, he's not top of the bill, make him the feature for everything. If you think he's going to be your superstar going forward, and he has that superstar potential to sell out places and pay-per-view, and that's what it's all about, I'm not sure if he is, but if that's what they engineer him towards, which I think they are, then he should just be on every show. Boxing, doesn't matter who boxing, just make him look fantastic. And because he has that amateur background, and certainly now the right people in his team that could train right, then And I'm sure then he had the right team. I'm not disrespecting those, but I mean, you're learning your trade, but keeping busy all the time. I think that's important. But for him now, I think, another fight. He could have won the fight. So we still haven't seen him win a really hard fight yet.
No, that's true.
It was a hard fight that he wasn't. I thought he was ahead, by the way, in the first fight.
You think about... I think the bill's getting kind of relatively set now, but you look at Callum Simpson outdoors in Barnsley, that's in 2 months' time.
Yeah, definitely.
Be great to get him on that, because that's a big occasion, and again
They don't like each other either. Callum Simpson, you can tell that there is that edge from...
Callum
Simpson
is very matter of fact. Callum Simpson's just like, I'll fight Ben Whittaker, with his kind of like in his brain being, why wouldn't I fight Ben Whittaker? Why would you think that I wouldn't want to do that? That's his stance on it. So getting him on that, if you could, would be great. We're hearing maybe July the 12th, Usyk Dubois, that's not going to be a boxer promotion, but it doesn't mean he couldn't fight on that card if it was being broadcast on Sky, for example. That's we don't know too much about that yet, but you just got to. He does need to box. It's almost like Sunday was kind of like the start of his career proper, if you like.
Yeah.
Again, like, no disrespect to the people who've been working with him up until this point, but one thing he said last week was that he knew that he needed to make that change, and he probably should have done it sooner, but everything was great and lovely and comfortable, and then it took a big shock to the system and that derailment to make him realise that it was kind of now or never for that sort of thing, really.
Yeah, and we'd all been speaking about that. We've spoken about it a few times on this show over the course of his time as a professional. He's had injuries. He's kind of, I wouldn't say dipped in and out, but obviously he's had lots of stuff going on outside of the ring as well. And we've mentioned in the past, and we've all heard about him potentially trialing with this trainer or that trainer. So him getting a trainer sorted and obviously everything going, to win in that fashion almost does put him straight back on track, doesn't it? Because arguably puts him ahead of where he was.
Well, you forget about, of course, because of the profile, but you forget about the last fight straight away, don't you? You just think,
it doesn't matter.
Where can you go?
If he would have kind of won a 96-94 decision, okay, from the flip side, he might have had to show some things late on in the fight and show a bit of grit and stuff, but it does take away that star power, doesn't it? Winning in second round stoppage and even all the stuff after the fight, whether it's your cup of tea or not, it still garners attention,
and that's why you're looking at fighters like Dan Aziz and people like that, not yet, but in a minute, because they're still good enough to win a European title, you would think, British titles and stuff, but but they just, they might just be slipped a little bit. I'm not quite sure. Before you go looking at Boatzis and Callum Smith and other like, I think that's the sort of way you are, I think.
I put out a tweet asking about who people want to see Ben Whittaker face next. You mentioned Lewis Edmondson. Obviously they were both at Boxer and they were trying to get that fight on. Didn't happen for whatever reason. He's now over at Queensbury. You mentioned Dan Aziz there. That was probably the most popular reply. He's boxing on Thursday this week.
Yes, so there,
Dan Aziz. So after that, all being well for Dan Aziz, I think
Gibraltar somewhere.
I'm not sure. I spoke to him this morning, actually, because I mentioned that people were kind of calling for that. But yeah, I'm not sure where he's boxing. But he's boxing on Thursday. And after that, all being well, wants to throw his name in the hat. I mean, somebody who's obviously headlined as recently as 12 months ago on Sky against Joshua Boatzis in a good fight. Craig Richards, another name that's kind of been thrown around there. So, I mean,
there are options.
He will always have options. That division in this country and the name and everything he brings.
There's one name, if he wins Saturday, Vidal Riley. Same weight, didn't he?
No, he's cruiserweight. Yeah, no.
But we've got Lyndon Arthur and Anthony. We've got Lyndon Arthur and Anthony Yard on Saturday. And the loser of that fight.
That's the one you meant, Harry.
The loser of that fight, that could be another option. Because Whittaker is. I know that some people who might get approached for that fight, like Dan Aziz, they'll look at it and they're level-headed and they'll think, I know what the script is here. I am supposed to be a name that you will get on your record. A couple of years ago, I was on the rise and people were talking about me doing this, that and the other. And now I'm on the other side of the card, on the other side of the aisle. And that's going to hurt. But at the same time, they'll know that it's going to be a big, big fight and they'll believe they can win. And that beating Whittaker is the quickest way for them to get back to where they want to be. So even though they'll kind of take it, it'll be not as an insult, but you know what I mean? They'll look at it and just think, I know what your plan is here, but they'll know that if they win, then that is the quickest route back.
He's boxing in Glasgow. He's boxing at the St Andrews Sporting Club. I know for a fact. That's what it is.
He gets to some interesting places, doesn't he, Dan? He boxed in Italy as well at some point last year, and then obviously he won the European title in France.
Remember he was on holiday?
Yeah, and he boxed over there. Yeah, so he boxed.
He boxed Khalid Graidia over.
Khalid Graidia, yeah. That was after he'd won the European against Thomas Fowler in France.
Just keep him busy.
Yeah, there's loads of
cheeky
names.
8-rounder in Italy.
Loads of names domestically for
there are loads,
at European level for Ben Whittaker to cut his teeth and get more experience, more exposure against guys who've been there and who are not there now, and some of the guys who are there. I mean, at some point you got him off the leash.
Shaq Peters is kind of the perfect one because he's a Birmingham fighter. He's well supported. He'll sell it. He absolutely. He sat down opposite us at ringside, like and he looks he's got some star quality. Shaq on, he really looks the part. Yeah, 6'6", 6'7". That would be, just from a marketing point of view, I think that would be the best one.
Okay, right. Moving on, just to talk about the undercard from this past weekend. Again, can't spend too much time on it, but a win for Sam Eggington against Lee Cutler. Andy, going to come to you. It was kind of looked at before the fight as very much a 50-50. One scorecard aside, it was a very, very close fight, but Sam Eggington just doing enough. There's life in the old dog yet.
Yeah, and going into the fight, being the crushingly dull man that I am, I thought Sam Eggington has to be the favourite here because you look at what he's done.
Which he wasn't at the bookmakers.
Compared to what Cutler had done. I loved the fact that Cutler, off the back of McKenna, decided, no, I'm going to fight Sam Eggington. I thought, good for you, because that's a proper step up. Yeah. Because this is a guy who's been a European, British and Commonwealth champion, boxed for the European title last year. He's as proven as it gets. And I didn't really feel like he was going down the other side of the hill, especially because I speak to John Pegg quite a bit, and if he was, John would say, and he would advise him to retire. He doesn't want him hanging around past his sell-by date. He's been an astonishing success story already. So I always thought it was a fight I really liked, and it was kind of interesting the way it went because I remember in the first half thinking Eggington's probably ahead. But in terms of the overall war, Cutler could certainly win this fight because particularly in rounds 3 and 4, Eggington was landing cleaner and he won those couple of rounds, but Cutler was getting on him, and you could see it was taking some gas out of the tank. And then he kind of stepped off a bit in the 5th and they both kept it at distance, and then they would get closer again and then they step off again. It wasn't like Cutler didn't want to, he was a little bit cautious, I think, as to when he should really put his foot to the pedal and just try and almost walk through him. And we didn't get into the corner much, so I don't really know what they were saying. But the scores after 8 rounds, like one was too wide and the other two being 5-3, that made sense. Mm-hmm. But Cutler was fresher at that point. And I saw him at breakfast yesterday, and I kind of, as I said to him, I thought you were a bit unlucky because although I thought those 2 scores were fine, I know you would have been confident that you were going to win those last 2 rounds. And you heard John Pegg, if people watched that, they heard John Pegg in the corner after 8 basically just saying to Eggington, it's too close, you find something.
Great corner advice.
Yeah, it was because, and what he said to me afterwards, John, was I was just trying to make him understand that we need to win one of these last 2 rounds. Not that this is a crisis, but we need one of these last 2 rounds. And he was totally right. If they'd won one of the last 2 rounds, they'd have won the fight. And
he said to me, he gave it very clear instructions. They're going to score this round, so I need you to go out there. I need to win the first minute of this round. Get out there, win the round. If they stop it.
And this is what's really important about having somebody who knows the rules in your corner, because it doesn't have to go on long in an incomplete round for them to actually then score it.
Go out and stick a jab on him.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. But I felt for Cutler because it was a good fight, and he will really want a rematch. But I doubt he'll get one because if you're Eggington, why? What for?
It's true. He's our Kiko Martinez, isn't he, Eggington? He's Britain's version of that because he's like, you just think, he can't keep going to the well. How long is it going to last? And he arguably he looks fresher than ever.
He's developed as he's changed as a fighter. I think over the years as well. Like I thought the jab won him the fight against.
He's a good boxer. He's a good boxer.
Underrated boxer.
Because you look at him and he looks like a brawler, doesn't he? Because his nose, his nose is not as pretty as mine, and but he looks like a warmonger.
And we think about all of those great fights he's had, don't we? When you think Sam Egerton, you think Egerton against Cheeseman, Egerton against Bilal and G Kutu.
That was a fight.
But you don't think about when he pieced up Joe Pigford. He just was levels and levels and levels. People were picking Pigford to beat him because they thought, Egerton likes a war and Pigford can punch. But Egerton can box. He's become a well-rounded fighter.
He can box. I think that's what I mean. You keep it at range. He's happy behind the jab. He's more efficient. They haven't got the fastest hands, fastest feet, but his time is good and he knows where he is. And he's not afraid to throw. That's quite important for him. He'll let his hands go. No, I mean, if he knows I've got to throw the jab, I miss. Okay, I'll just take a step forward and throw it again. I mean, he simplifies things in his head, and that makes him quite effective. You got to beat him with speed, I think, in and out with your feet, which takes a lot of energy. And so, and if you get close, he's more than happy to work away for a war. He lives on that. So he's a very, very hard man to beat, and you just tend to think this might be the fight that gets him. This might be the fight that he slows down. His vision goes, you can't see as much, all that stuff we always talk about. You're thinking the next fight surely has to be that fight for him. And this potentially, maybe what they were thinking, everyone else was thinking, maybe this might be the perfect fight because, this might, for Cutler to move on, Egerton might have lost a step, maybe, because how long can you keep having fights like him? And his answer is, watch me. I'll just keep having these as long as I want to. And by Egerton terms, that was a walk in the park for him. The fights he's used to having wars-wise, it was a close, hard fight, and he wasn't. I agree with you. I think the pattern was starting to go towards Cutler, so you tend to think he might finish the stronger. But then, you get past that. You go past that ninth round, and you got one round to go. You see the finishing line, and you get energy from someone else. You know what I mean? And with the experience that he has, Egerton, he might have done enough in that last round. So I think they can make the fight again because depends on because it's not going to be a massive financial thing for him to put that fight on again, for a promoter to put that on an undercard, and it was a good fight to watch.
Was there enough about the ending of the fight? I mean, we touched on it briefly earlier. There was, Sam Egerton being cut in other news. Water is wet. After the second round, he had one over the right eye, which was caused by a clash of heads. But the cut that caused the end of the fight, was that caused by a punch?
Well, it initially, yes. It was opened up originally by a punch, and we were discussing it. The referee was clear right from the start when it was stopped that it was going to go to the scorecards, and therefore, obviously, his determination was that it was an accidental foul, and we were kind of talking about it in real time in commentary. It wasn't that easy at ringside to work out which cut the doctor was looking at and which one it was exactly that had caused the fight to be stopped. But if a cut's been opened up by a punch but then gets worsened by a head clash, then that would still be damage caused by an accidental foul that's ultimately stopped the fight. So you would, even though it's originated with a punch, you would still go to the scorecards. There were cuts all over the place. There were cuts everywhere, basically. And I thought both fighters coped with them well. But there wasn't too much of a protest from the Cutler corner about that. I think nobody seemed to really know exactly which cut it was that we were looking at necessarily. But the referee gave that indication straight away that it was going to go to the scorecards. And that seemed to make sense to me, to be honest.
Okay, as we move on, you mentioned there, it's sort of a sideways step, I think, more than a backward step for Lee Cutler.
Yeah.
And Sam Egerton does what Sam Egerton does. I'm sure he'll be involved in another great fight, probably sometime in the next 3 months, because that's how Sam Egerton likes to do it. Right, quick last few on the undercard from Sunday night. A quick return to form for Fraser Clarke with a first round stoppage win over Ebenezer Tete. Tyler Denny with a win over Elvis the Soldier. What else does he like to call himself? I spoke to Kev Campion from Boxer. I like Elvis. Yeah, he's great. All of the kind of stuff. He's like,
what? Elvis turned out to be quite a lot better than I thought he was.
He was good on the night,
because I watched quite a bit of him, and obviously we saw him against Callum Simpson, but he was kind of overwhelmed from the start by Callum Simpson, and that's and he did well to sort of hang in there. But actually, he's better than I thought. He is pretty basic and he is quite slow, but he is obviously really strong. And he made Tyler Denny work hard for that win. He had to be switched on all the way through, and that's what you'd expect from somebody. But if he'd taken his eye off the ball there, Denny, he could have been in trouble. But the flip side to what Elvis does in terms of what he brings to fight week is that it's very unlikely that anyone is going to take you lightly because you spent the whole week rattling their cage. If you want to spring an upset, you want to kill them with kindness. Yeah. But as it was, you're on a big stage and you spent all week riling him up. He's not going to take you lightly. Yeah. Which is, it works because you add to the promotion so people want you there and they know you'll give your all in the ring. But it decreases your own chances of winning is the problem.
I said to Kev Campion, I was like, yeah, I like Elvis. He's interesting. Good guy to be around. I was like, yeah, it's your first fight week around him. He's just constantly having the soldier stuff shouted in his ear. But anyway, last few on the undercard mentioned earlier, Troy Coleman retained his British Boxing Border Control Midlands area title with a 7th round stoppage over Bradley Goldsmith. Very good fight up to that point. Elliot Whale, decision win over Lucas Ballingall. I think everybody anticipated that being a good fight going in, and it proved to be so. And a win for Mark Jeffers. Right, okay.
It was a big night back for Fraser Clarke.
Yeah. It was, and we'll just on that before we talk about Eubank Jr versus Ben. I mean, we kind of have spoke about it in the past, and I know it was discussed in the on the broadcast on Sunday, not Saturday. But Fraser Clarke being back, being able to kind of put, I mean, everybody saw the stoppage loss to Fabio Wardley. Everybody has subsequently reminded Fraser Clarke about it pretty much every day, as if he needed any reminding about it. But now puts that behind him, and there are some fights out there for him, aren't there? Jamie TKV against David Adelaide. They're going to have a rematch. The winner of that, you would think, would be a realistic proposition for Fraser Clarke. But good to see him get back on the horse.
Yeah, and he took all the questions in good humour, because I think he was in one of those situations where he's moved on from that mentally quite a long time ago, because he's in his own head every day, obviously, and he's thought about it and put it to bed. But he knew that it was all we were going to want to talk about, really, during the week. And I got that kind of vibe from him. He was perfectly fine, like he always is. He wasn't prickly at all, but you could just kind of tell that he was thinking, can we just have this fight on Saturday and then I'll do what I do and you can all stop going on about it. But there is a obvious setup for him now, which is the winner of Adelaide TKV. You feel like, why? It's just such an obvious fight, isn't it? Yeah. And same for Denny, the winner of Kieran Conway against Jerome Warburton for the vacant British middleweight title. Again, it just makes a lot of sense, and it's good for Fraser that route there. That route back is there.
Yeah, he doesn't just get a one-round blowout and then go back to sitting and thinking, when am I going to do this? There's an obvious option for him.
Live on DAZN Worldwide, April 26th, Eubank Jr versus Ben. 30 years of rivalry and hatred. I do hate him. All comes down to this. The next generation, a new destroyer. For family, history, legacy. Eubank Jr versus Ben, April 26th. Buy now at DAZN.com/boxing.
Okay. We are at our preview section of today's show. Chris Eubank Jr versus Conor Benn. 2.5 years on, Barry, from the third fight between the families, the first fight between them that never was. But we are here. Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, 60,000 people. Chris Eubank Jr versus Conor Benn. Are you excited for this week, Barry?
I am. Well, then it's a stadium fight, so you have to be excited. I think, and I think it's a more intriguing fight than it was when it was first announced. I think because they've both been quite inactive actually. People going about Eubank's been much more active, but barely. But there's been signs of decline in one, and the other one hasn't looked as good as he had looked up until what happened. So it gives it a bit more. I think it makes it a little bit closer in my mind than what I had it the first time round, which was, by the way, was Eubank quite comfortable the first time because of just size, experience, and the list goes on. What he had in his favour, but I sort of still got that. But I just think I think now the way he was in his last contest, he didn't look great at all. He slowed down dramatically with his work, with his output, which gives Ben a really big chance. But they're big characters, more than, forget about the stylistically, they're massive characters, like their dads were. And they've taken on the mantle of their dad's character as well. They're mirror images of their dads in their personalities and almost everything. But watered down versions of them in the ring, I would say that, in my opinion. but still good. And it'll be. I mean, the atmosphere will be electric on Saturday night, without a doubt. It really will. And I think this fight week will be tremendous. One of the best ones we've had for a long time, I think, because there's genuine disdain for each other. They've sort of been forced to dislike each other, and then now they just sort of, they're there now and they love it. I think it's more, not more genuine, but feels more real, or just as real as their dads. Which, by the way, was real. But then I've said this loads of time before. When they boxed the last time in Old Trafford, the dads, Nigel and Chris Senior, after the fight, they walked past each other in the corridor in Old Trafford, and I was a 19-year-old, 6-0 after that night, and they walked past each other, and I thought it was going to kick off. I thought, because there's not much room to move there if it all kicks off, and they just looked at each other, like stared at each other. No, nothing dramatic. It wasn't like we conned them. They didn't like each other, but they knew how to sell a fight, and that's the first time I actually realised it's not all real. You know what I mean? With all the stuff in the press conference, you just believe everything. Like Tyson's angry this and this guy's angry that. Leonard's just a beautiful man. You know, and then when you find out years later what their stories, you go, he wasn't so nice and he wasn't so angry after all. And you know, and them two, they didn't like each other, but they didn't hate each other that much because they just realised they just earned £1 million each back in '93, which was worth 10 million or something.
We were putting our Eubank Jr. Ben issue of Boxing News available everywhere from Wednesday together over the weekend. We had Harry Mullen, God rest him, former editor of Boxing News, his report from the 93 and the 90 fights, and he said in the 93 about the fact that, you know, when there was a low blow from Ben, which of course there was a few in the rematch, there was touching of gloves, and he said you could tell that there wasn't that same animosity as there were for the 1990 fight, for the original fight. But yeah, so
I can remember vividly the atmosphere, like just before the fight, because it was sort of drizzly, and they postponed. I remember this is on terrestrial TV, so they only got like the hour whatever to show the fight, and it's a load. And I remember there was loads of panic. No one would sit down. See, I would imagine loads of people nicked their seats and stuff at ringside, and in Old Trafford, and no one was good. And it was actually trying to get to sit down because and the rain, and they had to get it right because obviously you know it's on ITV, so they got adverts and everything. They got everything. Timing's got to be perfect. And it was delayed for like five maybe longer minutes, and it was a real panic. It was, but the tingle in the stadium was unreal. So I had no seat, by the way. I boxed quite often. I had no seat, but I'm there to watch it, and it was just like, this is just crazy. And then you think, is it going to go on? No, because in a minute it's too late. It can't go on. I don't know how it works because the news is after it. I don't know if they can they delay the news. I don't know if you can. I don't know. Anyway, it's just like it's bad, crazy, isn't it? It was just crazy.
It's like the first fight. The first fight was a Sunday night, and they had 1 hour ITV to do it. And I remember talking to Gary Newborn about it, and there was some shithousery with Eubank's walk-on music, so they were late going into the ring. And if it had gone the distance, they would have gone over their hour. And I think again, it was probably the news next.
And the financial penalties.
He got stopped at just the right time. And Gary actually did his post-fight interview with Eubank in the ring before they'd even made the final announcement. You know, the referee had his hand on Eubank's glove on one side, and he's got Gary Newborn asking him questions on the other because they were about to go off air. It's just a completely different world, totally different time.
I think there's going to be a tingle on Saturday night, just like that last one.
I think there is.
I can remember, 'cause I was young. It was my first real big fight that I was involved in. Not involved in it really, you know, but I boxed at and been at. I remember it vividly, almost like it was yesterday. So I can't wait to feel if I have the same sort of feeling from that one that I had this one, because it's a fantastic stadium. It's going to be better, acoustically better and everything, isn't it? So how it works out, it's going to be interesting, to be honest.
Just on this fight, Andy, I mentioned that it's 2.5 years since the fight was cancelled on that Wednesday. I tell you what, you mentioned about some excitement this week. I have to go some to beat 2.5 years ago. That was probably for me anyway the wildest week I've worked in boxing that week. That was incredible. Who do you think the I don't say the layoff, but the delay has favoured in this? Do you share Barry's thoughts about kind of looking at the fight differently than you did 2.5 years ago, or are you still on the same fence? We all know you're going to be picking Eubank, but you know.
Yeah, it's really what's really interesting about it is that that's a really difficult question to answer, because it's. I mean, Eubank. Logically, Eubank should win because he's bigger and he's boxed at a higher level at that weight, and Conor Benn hasn't. You know, that's the stark fact of the matter. But as for the delay, Eubank had the experiences against Liam Smith. He got knocked out, stopped on his feet, He would definitely correct me on that. But he had something happen to him that had never happened to him before and that he probably thought couldn't. And then he won the rematch. And you have to give him loads of credit for winning the rematch. But Liam Smith had a lot of problems going into that fight. And then against Germain, he got it done, but he didn't look great. And it is hard for him to make middleweight, and he's got this rehydration clause as well, although how much difference that makes, what he normally puts on post-weigh, and I don't really know. And then with Ben, he's not looked good in those two fights, particularly since the first fight was supposed to happen. And he is still coming up in weight, maybe not quite as much because he's boxed at super welterweight. But again, the inescapable fact is that Eubank is the one who has boxed at a higher level and at that weight consistently. So that has to mark him out as a favourite. The interesting dynamic shift for me now is that in the first fight, Eubank was the bad guy because, as he says, a bit wistfully these days, he's always been the bad guy. Kind of pantomime villain. And Ben was the good guy, like young, fresh guy on the charge, trains hard, lives the life. People were kind of buying into his journey, his story. He's not a good guy anymore, is he? No. I mean, he just isn't, and he's kind of embraced that. He's quite angry in press conferences, and that's because Eubank's very good at making people angry. It's a talent he has, and so he has kind of embraced, Conor, that role. But we don't have good guy, bad guy. We've got pantomime bad guy against bad guy.
Actual bad guy, yeah.
Actual bad guy, you could argue. So it's kind of
the perception of which.
Yeah, it's slightly odd in that regard.
Yeah, the way that I felt about it is I felt like the first fight had obviously it's all steeped in nostalgia, which is the biggest selling point around the fight 2.5 years ago, and indeed now, even with everything that's kind of happened since then. But it did have that. We hadn't seen Eubank really hurt. I mean, Groves hit him with some good shots, but not really hurt, and certainly not to the extent that he was in the first Liam Smith fight. So we kind of had this, and obviously Conor Benn by that point hadn't had the 2 VADA tests, and there was all of that kind of freshness behind him and momentum behind him, and you kind of had not the unstoppable force against the immovable object, but that was kind of...
He seemed very wholesome, didn't he?
Yeah, and it's easy to root for somebody like that and it's easy to root against somebody like Eubank under those circumstances. Whereas this does have a different feel to it.
I think they genuinely do loathe each other, though.
Yeah, they do.
I think Eubank looks at Conor Benn and just thinks, "You're a cheat." That's what he thinks.
Yeah,
he thinks you're a cheat.
He's said it, hasn't he?
And yet I'm still having to fight you. You're still getting this platform, and I do want to do it because I want to punch your head in and send you out of the sport. But I kind of don't want to do it because why you? How are you getting this opportunity? And I've never, like he says, still the bad guy. I've never lied. I've never cheated. I've never cut corners, but I'm still the bad guy. And I found that interesting about him the last year or so, because I think he looks at it and he just doesn't really understand it. And I wouldn't say he especially cares, but I think he is a bit different now after his brother passed away, and he's taken such an active part in his nephew Raheem's life.
Seems a lot more philosophical.
That's when he
now,
really comes alive, when you hear him speak. I watched some behind the scenes stuff, and he's not given much access, to be honest, but when he talks about him, you see something different from him. So I don't know. And Ben, I think, just in the way that his dad just couldn't stomach Eubank Sr., I think in an almost identical way, he just can't have Eubank, can he? In any way, shape or form.
And similarly, we were talking about it earlier with Ben Whittaker, and I think, in Eubank and Conor Benn, certainly in the last few years, have got guys who have sort of revelled in some way, shape or form in that bad guy role. I think out of the three, I think Eubank certainly cares the least, or certainly gives the impression of somebody who is a lot more able to detach himself, whereas you've got Conor on the other side, and as we saw this past weekend after the fight and in the post-fight press conference with Ben Whittaker, 2 more heart on their sleeve type characters.
Yeah, they're quite emotional, aren't they? Whereas Eubank, I think, is just a bit confused by why it is exactly that he's still a bad guy, because he'll look at his dad's career, and people started to kind of love him by the end, didn't they? After defeat, ironically. And Eubank might have thought to himself, well, I got knocked out by Liam Smith, but then I came back and beat him. So that should be the cue for people to start kind of loving me, shouldn't it? And it hasn't happened.
I think he'll, if he beats Conor Benn, I think it will be a celebrated result. I think that is the way that the fans look at things. But let's talk about the fight itself. Barry, what does Conor Benn have to do to win this fight?
It's quite simple, isn't it? I mean, all this, if you don't get it done in 3 rounds, he's finished. I'm not quite sure about that because, he needs a fast start and he needs to try and get Eubank out of his rhythm early. I think if Eubank could establish the jab, which is not one of his greatest weapons, but is a fast shot, but he throws in punches, fast 3-punch combinations, Eubank, but he needs to start the jab to do it. So if he gets on that, then it's going to be hard for you. Got to make Conor reset all the time. I don't know if Conor hasn't shown to have the intelligence yet to deal with that because he's always just been the bully, hasn't he? Especially when he stepped up in levels with Van Heeren and
Algieri.
I know they were past themselves, but they were still quality operators. Certainly Algieri at his time, and he just jumped on them quick. So it took away anything they could do. Use that experience. He just jumped all over him. So he needs to try and do that, but also with the jeopardy of walking and doing those fast shots. Now Eubank's not one of these, not a KO artist by any stretch. I think he hits snappy. Every punch is snappy. He's actually quite an enigma. He's one of those fighters, you watch him, and every punch he throws, you almost go, and then nobody falls over. So he looks like he hits like a train, but I think it's sort of an illusion. I think he hits sharp but not really concussive. And as Andy sort of alluded to, the last 2 fights from Conor Benn, he hasn't looked really dynamic either with his shots. He's doing the same movements, but not with the same reactions. And is that because he moved up in weight or for other issues? Who knows? Either way, or just time on the ring or whatever it might be that's caused that. But he hasn't looked the same. Or they're just 2 real tough guys. Peter Dobson was better than what we thought, and the other guy, maybe just more resilient. But he hadn't looked as sharp. So you got to go with what you see in form, and obviously past form and current form, if there is a current form, because they haven't been super active, and neither one's great at the minute. You have to say that. But I think for Eubank, you got to get those blistering combinations long, and just try and keep Ben trying to get in, and just keep him right at the end of that, and force him to jump over that front foot, make a mistake, and then you'll catch him with that uppercut coming forward with his feet off the floor. Can Conor Benn take a really good shot? We're not quite sure yet, are we? I don't think. We haven't really seen him.
We've not really seen him get hit since... I mean, when was the last time we saw him take a proper good shot?
Yeah, but against a puncher though, because even though Van Heeren and Algieri, even at their peaks, they weren't punchers. So it's. I'm not saying we matched well, but well enough, And
it was over quick against Vargas. Formella was the distance, wasn't it? But he didn't really get to him. I mean, you could argue it hasn't really happened since Cedric Payno.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
But even Payno, that Ben is not the same Ben. No, it sounds like a different person, isn't it?
Exactly. So, it's not really relevant, is it? I suppose.
Yeah, at any sort of level, he hasn't really boxed a punch yet. I'm not saying he can't take a punch, but
that was one of the. Sorry, but that was one of the kind of suggestions around that time when he was going. He boxed Adrian Granados, you remember, on the Mauricio Lara, Josh Warrington undercard. Couldn't get him out of there. And there was, you mentioned there, Van Heeren and Algieri, 2 guys in their day known as technical guys and both noted non-punchers. So there was this kind of train of thought at the time that Matchroom were keeping him away from punchers after the Cedric Payno performance. So
I don't think it was because of that. They're looking after their investment.
Yeah, sure. They absolutely completely understand the reason why you want to put him in against guys who he's going to look good against. But it was notably didn't really box anybody with a.
Just to note, fighters, we're not criticising you.
That's okay.
We're not saying you can't take a punch. We're not saying it. It's just we haven't seen it, and he might do that. But I mean, what I'm trying to say is. But when you take a really hard punch for the first time in a real life fight, not spar, we all take big punches in spar. In a real life fight, you don't know how you're going to react. As much as you think you're going to know, and all that stuff is in the genes and stuff. I understand all that, but sometimes you're more a product of your environment than you are of your genetics. I think for how you're going to react to certain situations, rather than just I naturally react to this. Well, no, your environment's forced you to react this way, and this becomes your set mode. I think I'm right in that. I'm not quite sure. I mean, you get you might get a good chin off your dad, but how you react when you're hurt might be different to how he reacted. I think so. I think that's quite important. So how he reacts. Well, we've seen Eubank react when he gets hit. most of the time it's been fantastic. Against Eubank, against Liam Smith, of course, he couldn't really react because he was wobbly legged and where he was. I think he didn't show any signs of not wanting to get involved in a fight. He was just, his legs were gone. He tried to get up too quick. We
could see what his instinct was, couldn't we? Though I'd never really thought of that, because you're right, with Ben, he has this air of ferocity and explosivity,
walls through walls,
and he
might do, by the way,
and he looks like every inch the warrior. But we actually don't know what he will do, or what he does when instinct has to take over, when you're hurt. He will feel like he absolutely does know, but actually he doesn't, because nobody does until it happens.
And with respect to and I know it was a long time ago. I mean, he did show plenty in that Cedric Payne
fight.
He
did, yeah.
But that was a long time ago, and Chris Eubank Jr. is not Cedric Payne.
And different, and also so just go back to the dads really quickly. Chris Senior and Nigel, both brave fighters. Nigel braver than Chris, in my opinion. The reason why? Because Chris had a chin that you couldn't penetrate pretty much. So even though he was brave to go into the wars, and some of those wars he had, especially a cruiserweight, he shouldn't have been there. But what I mean, he had the God-given granite chin. You can't train that. You can't teach that. That's what he had. That was probably his biggest asset more than anything else. So he knew going, I can take it. Where Nigel didn't have a great chin. He didn't have a bad chin. He didn't have a great chin. He had the chin of the rest of us. He had a mortal's chin. That's why I always tie him up with Fabio Wardley about being the most instinctive fighter since Nigel Benn, because when he was tired or hurt, because he put so much into every punch, Nigel Benn, he would tire quite quick in fights, but he wouldn't quit. I mean, the toughness of his mind. Nigel Benn, when he was hurt, he was at his most dangerous. When he was tired, he was at his most dangerous. Arguably did his best work when his back was against the wall, when he had nothing left, when he should have been looking for a way out, a rest, maybe quitting, whatever the reason you want to think. Gerald McKellen fights is a perfect example. When he went through that rope, he should have stayed there. All common sense would say, I had to go. It was early in the fight, he never had to go, but that's enough for me. And he just wouldn't quit. And I mean, almost every fight he's had, significant fight he's had, you've had those moments where there was a chance there where he could just feel sorry for himself or blah blah blah, and he just goes through with it, where he looks like he's knackered, but he just finds the energy just to keep going. You almost like a marathon runner got to go through that wall to get to the other side of the fitness reserve. He would be doing that in round 3. He'd almost look for it. He'd almost look for the hardest route forward to get to where he needed to be his most effective. Instinctive. I think he's better when he's instinctive, but he needed to be hurt or tired to get that instinct. I think he knew it. He'd go in sweating when he'd run into the ring, all angry and sweaty and stuff like that. But early in his career, if you can remember, you weren't born, you two. Early in his career.
No, I remember it.
Yeah, you can.
He's not as young as me.
No. Since you've had the kid, he looks it as well, by the way. but so I think, but you can't. I mean, he's a product of his environment. Rather than Chris Eubank Sr. having just that God-given chin, I think Nigel was in a product of his environment where he maybe grew up tough in the army as well. They're making all that stuff. They mould you into tough people, and Conor hasn't had that. I mean, he's a tough guy, and I think he's a brave kid, and I think he's going to have to show that Saturday night in stages. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Was that the gap? Is the gap stronger? You got bigger.
I've got bigger.
Okay. But so I think that's going to be a real interesting dynamic, is how he copes if he gets caught coming forward, or when the fight goes late. The people talking about when the fight goes later on, maybe Chris takes over, but it depends on how hard he's made Chris work, and how Conor reacts when he's tired. Does he go in? Does he have that dad mode? Can he draw from something to get through that? I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic. I don't see how it works out, but all logic would have to say that that Chris is bigger. Box at a better level continuously, even in defeat he's boxed at a better, higher level. Hasn't really, up until that one fight, hasn't shown really many vulnerabilities. He's not technically the best, but he's not the worst. He's arguably a better boxer than Conor Benn. Speed, I think Conor's got quicker one-hand speed, but he puts combinations together quicker than Conor.
And it's the speed of a bigger man as well. He's putting shots together faster, and they're heavier shots naturally, aren't they?
And he's been in hard fights against bigger people. He's been in hard fights against better people. You know what I mean? So he's from early in his career, by the way. You look at his resume and you go, actually, it's a fantastic resume, even though you haven't really got to you haven't, you boxed for a world title, but not really. You got nowhere near winning a world title really. And some of your wins again, you can check James DeGale. Okay, was past his sell-by date really at the time.
Matt Korobov, his arm fell off.
Yeah, all those things. You can pick holes in it all, but I mean, ultimately, he went up against a very good Billy Joe Saunders, and it was a close fight. I thought Billy Joe won, by the way, by a few rounds, but it was a very, very close fight. So he's shown lots of stuff, lots of good stuff. Though that was, I think it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. But November 2014.
So, again, that's another worry. At that age,
so old.
At that age, how old can he still do it? Can he still find the power, the energy to dig deep? Because one thing about Conor Benn, and you can argue all the stuff about him, but I do generally think he trains like a lunatic. I mean, every boxer should train like a lunatic. Really, he should be fit. But I mean, he'll train for a fast and continuous start. He'll train that way, and he'll want to keep it high energy and non-stop. And then we go back to the big guy. Can he do that against a big guy who absorbs those punches?
One of the things on the pace of the fight, Eubank throughout his whole career, as his dad, never fights 3 minutes of the round, does like to go for a walk, does like to have those little rests. How important is it for Conor Benn to not let him do that? Yeah,
well, they used to have a saying when you're amateurs, when he rests, you go harder. When you go when he rests, you go harder. That's your, not, you take full example, an issue for that. Go for it. Not just a little bit more. That should be your foot in the pedal, because once they slow, they're tired. So you got to be the bully in there. I mean, that was before power came into play, and I couldn't do it. But I mean, if someone looked retired, you're throwing the flurry straight away, and I think that's going to be important. And Chris has slowed down even more again. I think those gaps are bigger. He showed that in the last fight in Saudi, where he couldn't find a second phase of attack ever.
Dropped Germain, was it the first or second round? He dropped him a right hand.
Yeah, it was really early.
Really early in the
first
fight, and then kind of sort of, I don't want to say played with his food for a bit, but he got buzzed as well by right hand.
I think painful, because I think he can kick into second gear. That's definitely a wear and tear thing. That is more than age. It's a wear and tear of all the fights you've had. So I think that's something that Conor Benn can work off. But and also making weight's one thing. It's going to be a problem. How you make weight is important. Not making how you make weight. You can make weight and be lethargic, make weight and be brilliant. It's how you do it. I think that's going to be very important. How he's done it. You should have got people in where he should have a weight that he has to make every week and be on it like that. I mean, gradually and cleverly. And if he does it that way, then he'll have the reserves in the tank enough to be able to go at a higher pace. But I still think, Conor's got to get past those long punches as he's come forward, and those fast combinations that Eubank can throw. I think getting from A to B for Conor Benn is going to be a bit of a problem.
Just on that, we were going to come on to the weight in a few minutes, but as soon as you've mentioned it there, let's discuss it. How significant is the weight factor on both sides of it? It's not just Conor Benn moving up. You mentioned there Chris Eubank's been making that weight for a long time. He had his stint up at 168 pounds. We've been saying for years on this show that since he came back from 168 to 160, albeit not being a big 168er, he was definitely middleweight boxing up there, but still taking weight off as you get older doesn't make things easier. He had the 157 pound stunt and whatever else. How significant is the weight? That's probably, if not the biggest factor going into this fight.
I think the weight hurts Chris more than it hurts Conor. I do. I think going up to 160, okay, you could theoretically, boxers move better than punchers, and I made that up. That might not be statistically true, but I think it tends to think in my mind they do, because usually if you're a bully and a strong guy, the bigger guys can absorb it more. But if that bigger guy is boiling down too much to make the weight at an older age, then his resistance is no good against anybody. So that sort of evens it up for you. So I think it's better for Conor. I think in this particular situation. No, I don't think every middleweight's good for Conor. I don't think Conor doesn't belong in middleweight. A world-class middleweight is not the place for him to be around.
Like a Janabek or somebody like that.
Yeah, well, a Damas, anyone like that, who can make the weight man full of energy, and they'll just absorb your punches. I don't care how big a punch you are, they will be able to absorb it. Not it's certainly his power, which is good, but not Julian Jackson-esque. But Chris, like you've said, like you've been saying, has shown since he's come back down that the middleweight's not really the way he should be at. But he's too small for super middle as well. I think it's one of those horrible situations. But yeah, how can he? His tank goes quick, so I think it helps Conor in this situation. Though he's still got to take the punches off a bigger guy with snappy punches. So I think that's why people think those early rounds are important for Eubank, not to get the stoppage early. Is he might be able to hurt Conor early enough to play with his food down the stretch, using one of your little analogies.
I don't play with my food, Barry. It's very serious when it comes to me and eating the food. But yeah, one of the things I remember watching one of the Countess documentaries on, and certainly not comparing the fight, Marvin Hagler against Tommy Hearns, and Hagler said, I knew he was going to come out as the naturally smaller guy and try and stick it on me and let me know that he could punch. And Tommy Hearns said, I knew as the bigger, stronger guy, he was going to come towards me and try and stick it on me, which is why it went. So the early rounds of Saturday's fight kind of sounds like it could be a similar notion. You want Eubank to establish the jab. It doesn't need to certainly put himself in harm's way any more than he needs to, but for Conor Benn, he needs to get onto Chris Eubank Jr. and let Chris Eubank Jr. know that he can hurt him. If in the early rounds Conor Benn doesn't make a dent on the fight, it is difficult for me anyway to see where he wins the fight, Andy.
Yeah, I agree with that, but you've always got to be sensible, even if you're going to be really aggressive. You can't be reckless or gung-ho about it, or you can find yourself in big trouble really quickly, and potentially it can be over before it's even started. It is kind of counterintuitive in a way, isn't it, that you're the smaller person, so you need to go out there and make the bigger guy understand that that's not important, that you can get to them, because those of us who aren't fighters would feel like in any situation like that, you just try and feel your way through if you can, and see what things are like and try and adjust. But that's not the way that he'll think about it. I think the start will be, it will be really interesting. I was watching a bit of stuff that Eubank's done in the gym. I think he just pretty much all he's done really is let people in and film a bit of pad work and all the rest of it. But there's one bit where he's sitting on a ring apron with Jonathan Banks, and Jonathan Banks is saying to him, listen, what's in your head is what I want to happen with your hands. And what he means by it, because he explains it, is that we need to box according to your personality. So what he's basically, we're not going to try and reinvent the wheel here. We need to do what you're good at. And I totally get that. But at the same time, you look at how he boxed with Bomac, and I know that relationship hit the skids for quite incredible reasons, really. I mean, he can't come back to the UK, can he? I don't think anytime soon to train someone. But I do think it's a shame that it did, because you look at the way that he boxed against Liam Smith, and it was slightly different. I thought it was a bit more disciplined, a bit more controlled, and I feel like, for the reasons that Barry elucidated, that would be the way to do it against Conor Benn. Like, keep it longer. Don't really kind of trade up on the inside too much, or at least don't do it until you kind of tenderise him and he's maybe got a bit desperate. I think that would definitely be the way to do it if you're Eubank. Because you get the feeling that Ben is going to come flying at him in as educated a way as he can, unless it's all just some big kind of double bluff. These fights don't always happen the way that we think they're going to.
He comes out southpaw like Dillian Whyte did against Tyson Fury and starts getting on the back foot.
Sometimes you see a fight where you just think, this is a nailed-on all-out war, and then it's just not.
I mean, we'll save it for prediction time, but certainly the first fight, I predicted a very damp square Eubank Jr. decision with not really getting involved. One thing on the Liam Smith rematch, I remember thinking at the time, and obviously we heard after the fight, as you always do, you hear it before the fight, about Liam Smith's struggles with making weight, and he didn't have time, and etc., and obviously had the back injury, which caused the delay. I remember thinking at the time that I felt Eubank looked very wary in the early rounds of that fight, as you will be on the back of a stoppage loss, and I felt like it had obviously something to do with the fact that he's coming off the loss, but as what was in front of him became clearer and clearer to him, that gave him that confidence, where Liam Smith, he had no balance. He wasn't able to get his shots off. He didn't have the same intensity as he had in the first fight. And I felt like that gave Eubank a lot of confidence. If you go back and watch that rematch, there's a lot of holding from Eubank in the first few rounds. He gets Liam and he wraps him up straight away. And it's only when the duck in front of him, sorry, Liam, that gave him that momentum and that confidence. Be interesting to see what he's like in the first few rounds against Conor Benn.
See, I think he's got to get the centre ring for Conor, but it's going to be difficult, because I think Conor's going to go like a lunatic, and But he doesn't have to. I mean, he's got to be the one with the jet. He doesn't have to try and push you, but he doesn't want to try and push Conor Benn back. So you don't need to do that. You got to be getting him. You got to get the centre of the ring. So you got loads of ring because he'll be wanting to take little steps back and making space to create that space for the uppercut. You want to be using Conor Benn's aggression and all out intensity against him. So as he's trying to lean on you and throw the shots and come in fast, then you go bam bam, take a step, bam bam again. And then, but I mean, so you're sort of almost swaying back and forth. You go bam, bam, and then take that step with the back foot, the front foot stays there, and then he walks onto the uppercut left hook, and then you come back up, and he holds all the time anyway. Eubank, I think he's quite efficient at that, and then lean on him, and don't let him work, and all you got to do when you lean on someone, when you tie him up, you get your arms inside. Let him be the lunatic. Let him waste all the energy and trying to throw you. All you got to do is just stay there. And just get close, get your chest to your chest and put your weight on him and let him do all the throwing around. So make sure your arms are inside, that's all, so he can't get inside you. And then you've got to not hold him ref and all that rubbish and you might get warned or whatever, but just make him tire himself out, especially with that nervous energy. The more stuff he does, the worse it is. And for Conor, when he comes forward, he's got to come forward, but he's got to be lower than he's ever been before. I know there's an uppercut to worry about there, and that is Eubank's one of Eubank's best punches, but it's hard to be accurate with an uppercut continuously than it is to be accurate with a straight right hand or a jab. So you got to edge your bet. You got to stay low, and your head's got to be there, bump, 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 almost like a V. So you're bobbing and weaving, and I would sort of do it angles like that, and roll, and then like just take Chocolatito and Bam, mash them together.
Bit of Barry Jones.
And be that fighter.
Chocolatito, Bam with the Barry Jones chest hair.
No, but I think that's that's his route to get close. And I think, and then from that crouch, you jump in with the jab. You got to be punching up. That's pretty much what I should be saying. But Conor Benn, all his punches before he gets to the target, have got to be punching up. If he's not punching up, he's in danger of getting caught square from Eubank. And he doesn't want that because the longer reach and maybe the faster combination punches, he might be in trouble. So if he comes in low, everything comes from upward like that. And when he gets close, like I always say, that semicircle on the body is where he's going to be at home. Because he has got fast feet to spin around the target really quick. The step, he doesn't spin, he steps. Front foot stays in the middle and your back foot goes bum, punching, boom, punching. So you're here punching, and it's all close, rip through the middle. Body, up through the middle. Around here, body, up through the middle. Don't let Eubank hold you. And that moving around the semicircle will make it hard or obvious that Eubank's trying to hold you. And Eubank needs the range to get that up because he whips his shot. So he can't do it from here like you can. Especially if you're pushing on him and your chest is over your front knee and you're having that moving around like that, you're always in this crouched position to punch through. You just got to bend your legs and then extend your legs. You don't even have to almost lift your arm up. You can just use your legs to do it, boom, boom, like that, and make him panic if you can. So thank you, my 10%, please, boys. When you win your fights, either one of you.
You mentioned there about the jab from Conor Benn. I know that's a shot that he and Tony Sims worked a lot on and have worked a lot on as part of his progression. I think you can see that throughout his career. Obviously very difficult to out-jab the bigger, longer man, somebody like Eubank who's got fast hands and a decent jab as well. How does Conor Benn go about that? Because if you look back basically what I mean is, does he put the jab to one side with regards to Eubank's jab? Does he try and meet him with the jab? Does he try... Because if you look back at a lot of Conor Benn's work, a lot of it does come off that jab. But trying to out-jab the longer... quicker guy, heavier guy, does seem like a not optimal game plan.
See, if you're jabbing here to here, then he's not going to reach because you're going to be that far short. And if he's just as fast, you're faster. I'm not sure how fast they are. I think he's naturally fast to Eubank, but with the way Ben explodes, he might get more speed on his shots. But so rather than go there to there, if you go low, you're coming from here, and he's coming there. So you might get there before him. His comes high and you're going to come up. So I think he can use the jab to get in, but he has to get low and bend his legs, which, by the way, takes loads of energy out of you. If you haven't trained to do that, getting that low, anything that involves muscles drains your energy. All the biggest muscles in your body, I think, are at the back. So that's where punchers usually have big traps and big, like Naz had big legs on your bum or whatever, the technical term for bum. But it's...
Glutes.
Yeah, I'd rather bum, like, to be honest. But anyway, but that's where all the muscles are. So when you get low, you're engaging those big muscles in your legs and your bum, and you know, every muscle. So, but it takes a lot of energy to do it. That's why punchers usually wear out after a while, because you know it's not just swinging the shots; they're using all the muscles to try and knock you out with. And even if they are doing it smooth and mechanically, they're still doing it. It looks like there's no effort because they mastered the craft of doing it. So, but it's worth doing that and taking the risk of tiring out than not doing that and trying to punch higher and square with Eubank, because you might be getting caught with the jab all the time. And if that's happening, that's going to be a situation he hasn't been in before for Ben. And then your mind, again with everything, I always say panic. I don't mean like they go, oh, I just mean once things don't work, having a long amateur career helps you think through a fight. More than anything technically, it helps you think through a fight, because you've been in fights, things haven't worked, you try to adapt. When you were 10 to up to when you were 17 boxing for your country or international tournaments.
And you've got to do it quick as well.
Yeah.
Short fights.
Yeah, so you learn to adapt really quickly, or you don't and you're not very good, whatever it is. But I mean, that helps you. That's why boxers, you know, sometimes don't panic when they get hurt than punchers do, because punchers get away with loads of stuff, and heavyweights don't know what to do when they get hit because they're used to knocking people out. But I mean, filling someone's brain with thoughts makes them panic, because they think shit, there's too much to think about. And when you get hurt and tired, and you start putting different looks on people, like Canelo, making you feel the power early, as we always say, is not much for you to go to hurt you. It's for you to start thinking, shit, right, I got to throw this jab, but I got to be careful of that, because if he hits me, I felt the power. And then you start thinking about that. But if I'm thinking about this, I'm leaning too far over, which means my jab's not going to be right. And you don't think like this, but your mind must be thinking like this, it's subconsciously. But there's too many thoughts in your brain. And then what you do then is you tense up. And where you want that jab to go, pop, you go, because you're thinking too much, and you're thinking, as you think, your neck and your arms and all, you're all tense up. You go, whap.
It tires you out.
Yeah, so that's the worry that happens to Ben. But he's trying too hard to get to you, and the harder he tries, the worse it is. So if he gets out jabbed early, he'll be tensing up, trying too hard, and then by 5 rounds he will be exhausted. So if he comes lower, though it takes a lot of strength with your muscles, but you'll be able to explode in the shots from a better angle up. And by the way, when you look up at the target, the vision there, it's like, I know you see those films and like God and the crowd's open and it goes, ah. It can be like that sometimes. The vision you got when you look up is so much more. I live my life this way, by the way. It's a better view down here. But I mean, it is though. You see so much of the target and what you can do with it. Especially if you be able to go, and Ben can move around that semicircle. So he could, if he can do that and get in with the jab and have success, later in the fight, then he will have a field day on Eubank. But I don't think he's going to do that. And I think he's going to try and jab to get in, but get caught coming in, and then start swinging that right hand over the top. And then you got to have the experience then, when things don't work for you, to not panic and make it a war. Or he becomes his dad, and he gets knackered and hurt, and becomes that instinctive animal that we haven't seen before. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah, it could happen.
Yeah, and I hope so, because that makes it as good as the dad's and first fight.
Right, it's 10-2. So we have, 20 minutes before we've got to get you out? 20 minutes.
What's that?
Is that what
10-2. 15, we split it on the middle, 15.
Yeah, okay, sounds brilliant. Just working out how much to talk about the undercard, which is, we need another hour to do the undercard. But before we do that, final question that I have on Eubank Jr. Versus Ben, I have for you, Andy. Chris Eubank Jr. has said a few times in build up to this fight, if he can't beat Conor Benn, then it's over. Do you agree with that?
Well, no, because there's a rematch clause. It doesn't mean that he has to do it, though. You can retire, can't you? No one can stop him doing that. But I do think that in his head, that's how he's framing this, motivationally. Because I think for him, it would be an absolutely crippling thing to happen to lose to Conor Benn, because he is bigger, he is more experienced. People will look at those bare facts and they will expect him to win. And I think he would find it would almost ruin his career, I think. I would go as far as to say that if he were to lose to Conor Benn. Conor Benn will absolutely hate it if he loses to Eubank, but there's a way back, because not that he would ever make excuses, but you can let other people find them.
The excuses are there in front of
There you go.
And he's younger.
There you go. I think for Eubank, this
Point.
is absolutely massive in terms of, I'm not sure he's someone who's particularly obsessed with legacy, to be honest, because he's freely admitted that boxing for him is about making money first and foremost. But if he is bothered about that, then this is huge for him.
This is a different legacy, isn't it? This isn't the
legacy.
legacy. This isn't a legacy of him as a fighter. This is him protecting the Eubank name. This is a different type of legacy. I think if Conor Benn beats him, I don't think we see Chris Eubank Jr. again.
I think you could be right.
I don't think we see him again.
I mean, I think we see the rematch, unless he gets blasted out by Ben. Just because the money. How can you say no? You can't say no. And he's got enough money now, never to box again. But there's too much money to turn down. If the fight is relatively close, if say Ben beats him on points and is quite wide, but still he's had pockets of success, Eubank. Okay, I think that's the end of his career. Any aspirations of doing anything else except boxing Ben again is gone. But he'd have to take the money for the second fight, if they can sell it. By the way, because I mean they can. If Conor does okay, actually maybe they can sell.
Is it a two-way rematch clause? Is it just one way?
I think it's both ways. Because
it's not holding up.
It's not holding anyone's career. Yeah, it's not holding anyone's career. They used to fight. No, neither one of these.
It's like a two-legged Champions League game, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's like Hey Bellew. It is like Hey Bellew, and that wasn't holding up anybody's career in global terms. In global terms, it wasn't of any particular significance, but it was huge here.
Yeah.
And the obvious thing to do after they fought once was for them to fight again, because people wanted to see it. But and you never know what's going to happen, because how bizarre was that? What happened in that first fight? He ruptures his Achilles tendon, and all of a sudden you've just got something that you could never have imagined, and you do want to see another one, because you just think, okay, well, don't we need to see what happens when Hay isn't fighting on one leg? And not to take anything away from Bellew, because when he took that fight, people thought that David Hay might kill him. That was the chat.
True, yeah.
But like I say, I think this might be things are going to happen this week. I think there's going to be shenanigans, and I don't even really know what they're going to be.
It's been too quiet, hasn't it?
We've got to prepare ourselves for something extremely odd potentially happening on Saturday, because in this sport, more often than you think, more often than even we think, strange things happen, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if something bizarre happens on Saturday.
I completely agree. I have that feeling as well. I feel like something's going to happen.
The old man's
early stoppage. I don't know, but
the fact that because only very recently he's come out again and said something. Just the timing just seems too suspicious for me to be. I was
at that Michael Watson walk last week where he turned up very low key, Chris, very low key. He wasn't there. Then I turned around and there he was. And there was a few press around, but not loads. And inevitably they asked him about it, and that's where that kind of came from. But I would imagine that the organisers of this fight will be trying to tempt him to get involved, and we know that they do have the resources to tempt people. It's whether he goes for it or not, I don't know.
His number will be very large.
Oh, it would be absolutely massive. Exactly. The Ring magazine might even look at it and think, I don't know about that.
I want the same thing as Conor Benn is being paid. There we go. Hopefully he doesn't tell me off if he sees that impression. But anyway, okay, we've got 8 minutes or so, which is 4 undercard fights, 2 minutes a fight. Let's get our predictions going, although Andy's going to be boring this week, as he always is.
I'm commentating on the fight also, so I don't think I should give my...
What the hell is the... That's it. No, but Barry's joking. We're okay. Right, anyway. So, Andy, it's going to be who's the favourite. We've got 2 minutes per fight, so a 1 minute breakdown. First fight, Liam Smith versus Aaron McKenna.
Smith has to be the favourite, correctly so, but he's been out of the ring for a long time. It's a long, long time. And the last time we saw him, obviously September 18 months ago, was it now? And the second performance against Eubank is one that he'll want to forget. He'll write it off due to all sorts of circumstances that meant that was the best he could do that particular night. How much is left? That's the question. McKenna is really, really hungry, but it's a huge step up. But if Smith's not quite at it, this could be one of those nights where the younger man takes that massive scalp and really kicks on.
Barry?
Yeah, it's quite easy to sort of dissect in that respect, because it is that, isn't it? Like, if they must be banging out Liam Smith is a wounded animal now, and he can't move his feet, can't move his head. Pretty much. If he can't slide in and out, then he's a sitting tag. And McKenna punches long and hard. He's going to have a hard night. but everything points to Smith being dominant. Smith should really, I don't think he's, except for the injuries, I think he's still pretty good. So I think he should be able to just block and counter a lot of the stuff. I think the first round, few rounds going to be hard for him just to adapt to the speed and the output, the volume of McKenna. But once that, I think those long punches are going to work against McKenna because he'll be throwing long. But Smith is one of those guys who can slide inside your punches quite easily, actually, and punch off that. You throw a jab and it's too long and it overextends. He'll slide in. And his natural body, the way he slides in, his body, naturally, because he keeps his hand tight, you're only going to make a little turn to come back with a nice uppercut or left hook. And he's going to be inside where McKenna can't defend. So I see that, and I fancy, with that, a little bit of danger attached to it, because again, how injured is he, and some injuries don't go away. But I fancy Smith for a stoppage, and a sort of about the 6th round or something, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, again, like you just said there, Barry, I think it's a fairly kind of cut and dry fight to look at. I do lean towards Liam Smith as well for the experience factor, 12-round fight as well. Yeah. McKenna's never done 12 rounds. Liam Smith obviously very experienced over the distance, very experienced on the big occasion as well. It is a big occasion, and Aaron McKenna certainly is taking, you're just looking at his resume here. He had that really good fight with Usman Lima, who's a good fighter. But outside of that, there's, and with respect to Lima, that is still, levels below where he boxes this weekend. It is a huge jump up in class and in levels.
But it's one that he really wants.
Yeah, he've been calling for it for a long time, haven't they? Both McKenna's one of those big opportunities.
It's the sort of name as well. If you go back in for other fighters over the years, that's the name a former guy was.
Been out of the ring for a while.
Old in the tooth. And
there's certainly there are some signs there of a potential upset, but I do have to lean towards the proven commodity in Liam Smith if he is somewhere near where he was for that first Eubank fight, especially. Going to bring it back round. So Andy, over to you first for Anthony Yarde versus Lyndon Arthur 3. So good they did it thrice. So nice they did it thrice.
Yeah, the trilogy. It's given what happened in the second fight, although it's a while ago now, not that long ago though, you would have to, I would make Yarde the favourite because that was a comprehensive win. Lyndon Arthur is kind of difficult to read, I've always found, in terms of what you're going to get. There's plenty of ability there. I'll be interested to see how he is this week, because the last couple of times we've seen him, tough fight with Liam Cameron, but got the decision and did win.
Yeah, thank you.
He did win. Yeah. And against Bivol, he had 7 weeks to prepare. He had a problem with his foot. I remember talking to him at the press conference. And a big battle for him was managing to answer the first bell in decent shape. And I wouldn't say he didn't try and win, because it's just rude. But at the same time, going the distance was, I think he felt that was kind of his victory, really, and he had to dig in towards the end, and that is no mean feat, going the distance against a guy like that. But Yarde has to start favourite, I think. Yarde has to start favourite.
Barry?
Yeah, exactly the same. I think the first fight wasn't great. I know there was issues with obviously family matters. I think there was a death in the family for Anthony Yarde, but sounds really crass. But all issues, Lyndon can say he had issues for the second fight, maybe you already did say that. But I mean, neither one has looked fantastic lately. I mean, Anthony Yarde was awful in his last performance. Yeah. But I still think you have to make him a big favourite. I do think you get the stoppage as well, actually. I think it'll take longer than the first time. But Second time, sorry. Yeah. But I think, as I mentioned it after the start of the show about coasting, and he does that. He's not always in fights he's winning, but sometimes he just takes too much time off. He almost seems like he can't be bothered. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's just too relaxed. And I just think, whether he's winning a fight or not, just the fact that he waits too long for an explosive puncher there's always going to be a problem and an issue. So yeah, I think, and now Yarde knows he can get to him. He's going to be, and I think he's understood that he has to be a little bit more assertive than he used to be, rather than just wait for the punches to come for him. He creates the spaces now. He has more experience, so I think it gets him and stops him, and I think that might go 6-7 rounds.
Yeah. He needs it, Yarde, doesn't he? He really, really needs it, because I know he's made some good money in his career, but at the same time, the last 18 months or so have in some ways been a bit of a disaster, because he kind of fell out with or split with Frank at exactly the wrong time, because that was when Riyadh season started. Joshua Buatsi then basically fought 2 fights that he would have had. Then the fight with Buatsi didn't happen. He boxed on that card you mentioned against Ralph Vilkans, and it, you know, it's all pretty underwhelming. Buatsi was there that night. The whole point was that they would talk the fight up, and but neither of them mentioned it in the end, because there didn't really seem a lot of point, and he really needs to win.
And then Buatsi has a British classic then with Callum Smith. No, Buatsi and Smith, and it was always Buatsi and Yard going to have that British classic, and Smith and Buatsi had it.
Exactly.
It's mad, isn't it?
I lean towards Yard by stoppage, but I thought it was very poor against Ralph Vilkans. And yeah, I mean, it's difficult to get the second fight out of your memory and that route to victory, but he did put a lot into that fight, getting that stoppage in the second fight, and it would have been very interesting to see how that fight would have gone a round or two later, because I did feel like he was blowing, but ultimately got the job done.
And he's got the power, hasn't he? He's not a guy who's looking to swing a hope he hits you. He knows he can hit you and hurt you.
So I think Yard by stoppage, around sort of the same. I think maybe a slight. I think similar fight maybe to the second fight, but it wouldn't surprise me an awful lot if Lyndon Arthur can weather that early storm. If he does slow down Yard, and Arthur can kind of maneuver his way through the second half of the fight. Interesting fight, because I think Yard, as he has done throughout his whole career, really has kind of had those significant moments or significant fights, and then 2 or 3 less significant moments or significant fights. And there does come a time, and you know, he's 33 now, which is obviously not old, but you know, he's not in his mid to late 20s anymore.
There's no loser wear and tear in him though.
That's a good point. Yeah,
that's the truth, because a lot of those early fights were just blowouts for him. Wherever the wrongs they went, he was up against lower opposition. It's only when he stepped up, he's shown his mettle. Actually, he's shown the quality in the defeats. I think that's why it's hard to judge him. Even
that first Lyndon Arthur fight where he lost, he was never. I think it was a harder fight against Ralph Vilkans. As far as taking shots. I mean, the end of the fight,
he doesn't feel sorry for himself. You know what I mean? He keeps going, so he's got that built in him. And listen, Lyndon Arthur can spoil anyone on his day. But I just don't think. I think with the power of Yard, and he knows how to get to him. So I just think that you have to pick him.
Barry, Chris Smith versus Brandon Glanton.
Good fight. This is good fight to watch. But you
wouldn't want to be in it though, would you?
No, though Billum Smith probably loves these sort of fights, doesn't he? Big puncher, yes. I'm going for a Billum Smith stoppage. I think Glanton ran out of steam, which he has in the past, by the way. But I think you run out of steam against Billum Smith. Though saying that though, I think we're going to see a decline in Billum Smith quite quickly, actually,
because of the
fights he had. Yeah, so that Zerlo fight was a hard night. I mean, he was brilliant in defeat. I thought he was like, he came up against a guy who was much better than him, but he wouldn't let him bully him. He wouldn't let him have too much of a say. He always fired back, even though he was getting out punched and stuff. But it was a really good fight. But that's a fight that's hard to get the same. I don't know if you can keep going to that adage of going to the well. I don't know. And he's had to do it all the time, most of his career really. Because you look at Billum Smith's career, and you think it's been hard from the get-go, haven't it? Pretty much. The few fights where he's in with people like React Ball straight away, and just think it's been hard all the way for him, like really. And he gets through with his toughness. I mean, he doesn't look like that. He looks like a quiet boy, doesn't he? Still, he does, doesn't he? He doesn't look like Nicky Piper. He don't look like a kid who should be tough. They look like posh kids, like nothing wrong with saying posh people can't be tough. But in our industry, you don't ever think they're going to be boxers and fighters, and they're not posh kids, but they look like that. And because they look the part and they're well spoken and stuff, but like they're tough. And he reminds me of Nicky Piper. And that boxing is different, but not in that respect. That he's a real tough kid. But I think But I still think that Glanton will run out of steam. He'll try and knock him out early, and I think Smith's tough and strong, tucks up well, and understand, more experience at the higher level. So yeah, I mean everything points to a Billum Smith points win, I think. But I think because he's not a huge puncher, but I think he's heavy-handed enough, and I think Glanton, when he tires, I think the experience of Smith now will know how to step on him in those last few rounds. I think it might be late, 10-11, but I think he stops maybe on his feet. But Glanton's exhausted. That's my prediction.
Andy?
I like it as a fight. I think it's going to be a really entertaining watch. And Glanton turned up fight week, didn't he? Okoli CBS, and made a load of noise because he was in Okoli's camp, I think, at that point, wasn't he? And he was hollering for a fight with Isaac Chamberlain. So we came across him.
For a fight with anybody.
Yeah, we came across him then, and we didn't really know too much about him. I mean, he's got a couple of defeats. One was a really close fight against David Light, where I guess as the home fighter, which he was, he probably thought he was going to get that, but he didn't get it. And there's another one against
Soslan Asbarov.
Yeah, against the Russian guy who beat Dmitry Kudryashov in his second fight. So that's not quite as bad as it looks, losing to a 3-0 fighter. You wonder about the matching a bit there. Did he really know what he was getting himself into? But the win against Egorov in his last fight in Russia, that's a really big win, because Egorov, I think, isn't what he was, but at the same time, he essentially made him quit late in the fight, didn't he? That's what happened. He took a knee and just stayed there because he'd had enough. And that's making a Russian do that in Russia. That's a good bit of work. But ultimately, I think when you match them up, what he's good at is what Bilham Smith is good at. A toughness, if you like. There's more to Chris than that, but if you want to reduce it, and Bilham Smith has operated at a much higher level, and therefore I would expect him to win.
And his toughness is predicated on him being effective with his punches. With Bilham Smith's toughness is about him being able to absorb your punches. I think that's a bit different. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it does. Yeah, no, it makes sense. I'm leaning towards Chris Bilham Smith by decision, but I think this is a very dangerous fight. I think that Brandon Glanton is starving, hungry.
Yeah, he is, definitely.
And a starving, hungry guy. And these two, I think, will go like that.
Yeah.
I think they'll meet in the middle of the ring. Chris Bilham Smith, you mentioned there, he's had a hard career. He's boxed on some massive bills. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger to him than obviously the Okoli win in Bournemouth at the football stadium. And against Riakporhe, had that hard fight against Zurdo Ramirez where he came up short against the better guy, certainly on the night in Zurdo Ramirez. Big question here is how much is left, not necessarily from a physical perspective, because I think that would have been made clear in the gyms or whatever. I'm sure he's but it's when it gets into 8, 9, 10, 11, does Chris Bilham Smith still want it? That's the big question around this fight. I do think it goes the distance. I think Glanton's tough, and I think he carries enough power that Bilham Smith will be more wary than he was in some of his more cavalier performances. But I think this is a tough fight, a physically grueling fight. I expect this to be.
Yeah.
And you would have to say Bilham Smith has probably significantly more miles on the clock than Glanton. Admittedly, at a much higher level and experienced against much more capable guys and achieved a lot more. So this is a tough fight. I do lean towards Bilham Smith, that extra seasoning. Technically, I think he's a better fighter than Glanton, but Glanton can punch. He can hold a shot. And I think he is hungry for this fight.
Yeah, and Chris is at that stage of his career now where whether he likes it or not, people will ask exactly that question. Will this be the fight where on his stool after 9 rounds he realises that the fire isn't there anymore? And he'd find it insulting that we would suggest that. But that day comes and you don't see it coming, because if you saw it coming, then you wouldn't take the fight in the first place. But it will come, and it will take him by surprise as much as it will take anyone else by surprise. More so if it happens kind of mid-fight. It's more convenient if you... Like Frotch tells a good story, doesn't he, about how he starts training for Chavez and he kind of knew he wasn't going to take the fight, and then he went on a run, and halfway through his run he just, for the first time ever, just got a bit of a twinge and thought, I can't be bothered. And at that point he knew it was over. And you hope it's going to happen in that setting rather than on your stool. Macklin always tells me that he realised that he was done kind of halfway through his last fight with Brian Rose and just thought, I'm just going to have to try and dig this out now, but I really, this is over. Where that lightning strikes, you don't really have control over it.
No, and yeah, as I said, I do lean towards Bilham Smith. Just think he's slightly, I think he's the better technician and has boxed at a higher level. But it's a dangerous fight. Very, very. I expect it to be a really good fight. It's opening the card, isn't it? Did you say? Yeah. I mean, that's a good one to open it with. Right, last quick couple. I know we're trying to get out. The last one, Barry, going to come to you first. Vidal Riley against Chev Clarke.
It's a good fight. This is actually and hard to pick a winner. Certainly with form, but because Clarke's very effective at closing the gap and he's strong. His last fight, you come at a guy who's just strong, if not stronger, and I think that struggled with him. So stylistically, do you think Riley will be able to boxing quite comfortable because of that? He's not a guy who's going to try and put that physical presence in front of you. So it's going to allow Clarke a chance to do it his best, and that's like get nice and low, to get the fast feet to get in close and work away and work up through the middle. But Riley's slick as well, isn't he? But he hasn't been in a fight yet. I don't think anywhere near like this. So I find this one really hard to pick, because my whole instinct would say Riley dances his way to a points victory, with every round being dangerous, but him having the discipline to stick to his the jab and not getting too greedy with his success. But then I can also see Clarke just blocking, parrying, blocking, and take a few shots, but getting in close, and then when he gets in close, going from the left side to the right side, whipping that hook across the body, that uppercut through the middle, right hand over the top, and just Riley not used to that sort of intensity. So if I got to pick a winner, I'm going to stick my first instinct and go Riley on points. But I think this one's the hardest one to call. I do.
Yeah, so do I. So do I. And that like, yeah, what he said, because they'll both look at it and feel like there's a way.
Doing Welsh.
Yeah, they'll both look at it and feel like there's a way to win. Vidal Riley will think, I'm better at boxing than you, and I can beat you doing that. And Chev Clarke will think, but I'm harder than you, and I'll drag you into a hard fight, and I'll beat you doing that. And one of them will be right.
I've got a slight, not necessarily out there, but yeah, slightly different. I'm going to go for Vidal Riley by stoppage. I felt and have felt Chev Clarke gets hit too easily as a professional, and I think he has been hurt in quite a few of his pro fights, which obviously, certainly up at those weights can happen when you're boxing good guys, and he's not, he's had
a good development as well.
Yeah. He's taken, but I mean, the Efe Apochi fight, late in that fight was really fraught for him. He had the fight against Mosquera over in Monte Carlo that I was at, was hurt down heavy early in that fight and was hurt, and I just wonder whether or not maybe long amateur career, done a lot of top level sparring in the gyms against big guys. Yeah, I'm going to go for Vidal Riley on a bit of a punt by stoppage. I think I just wonder where Chev Clarke's punch resistance is at this stage of his career.
I do understand what you're saying there, but I think because he's been matched quite steep, because he had 9 fights now? Maybe 10,
something like that.
10. Yeah, not many, is it? Think how many of the people he's boxed as well that in that small space of time. He's not being able to develop, taking a shot of someone, at a lower level and just being, I've reset myself. So he's taking, he can take a better punch, people who can punch better, but more accuracy, with more power. And he does get caught. And he's walking through people, and I think he's boxing with a guy who thinks, a bit of arrogance in his work, which you need to be a puncher. But yeah, and I think sometimes he walks onto a shot just thinking he can bully you. But I think now getting stopped by Mosquera, he probably learned, actually, I can't bully everyone. So I think that loss helps him in many ways. Unless his confidence is shot, then who knows? But
it showed a lot in that, and showed plenty of grit to see it through to the final bell. But yeah, that's my kind of out there one. Right, okay, main event, quick one. Andy, main event, Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn.
I'd make Eubank the favourite. I think logically you have to make Eubank the favourite.
Barry?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the better fight now than it was the first time round, but I'm going to go Eubank for a late stoppage.
What round?
Late, isn't it?
Which one?
Last third.
Okay. 10, 11, 12.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm going to go for Eubank Jr. points in a better fight than I thought it would have been a couple of years ago. But I do lean towards Eubank points. I do feel like he will revel in the matador role. I think over the years he's become more of that, with the part of it's been some of the trainers that he's worked with and the opposition that he's had. But I see Eubank getting behind the jab, weathering some storms, and winning by decision.
I think Conor's trying to win the fight too much when he's exhausted, that in the end he walks into a shot or a cumulative combination or so, and it's just too much for him. Like when he gets stuck on his feet, or just falls over. But I think because he'll push you so much that it makes every round a bit like that. I think Saturday's going to be an amazing atmosphere. I know this is not a world level fight, as we compare to other fights where you've had genuine world title aspirations, which Conor will have, and I don't know what Eubank even has or cares. But it's big fights are big fights, aren't they? That's whatever the reason they're big fights for. That's what they are.
Absolutely. And there we have it. That's it. Well, we're back. Thanks very much to Mr. Barry Jones and Mr. Andy Clarke for joining us, and to you for being so patient over the last few months. But that is all from us here. Thanks very much for watching. Enjoy the fights this weekend. Let us know in the comments who you think wins, Chris Eubank Jr. or Conor Benn, and we'll catch up with you next time.
Eubank Jr. versus Ben. Over 30 years of rivalry and hatred.
I do hate him.
2 warriors, 2 wars, but the feud was left unfinished. Then, a bloodline born.
Legacy, respect.
The next generation.
My dad's my hero.
A new destroyer. Rivalry in their veins. Hatred in their blood.
This is going to be a bloodbath.
Family.
This is personal. I can't lose to this man.
History.
Eubank, Nigel Benn. This is a war.
Legacy.
This is the final chapter.
Eubank Jr. versus Ben. Live on DAZN Worldwide. April 26th. Buy now at DAZN.com/boxing.